The force Hongzhuo exerted from his leg was extremely great, causing Zhao Qinghe's face to be stepped upon to the point of warping in shape while his cheekbones emitted cracking sounds and were on the verge of breaking. One doesn't strike another on the face, let alone trampling onto another's face with one's legs. This intense feeling of humiliation caused Zhao Qinghe's entire body to be unable to help but start trembling, and his eyes almost split open as blood flowed out from them. If it was possible, he wished for nothing more than to die now than be tortured and humiliated in such a way by his enemy. He tried his best to struggle, but everything he did seemed so powerless. He who had suffered a heavy injury was completely exhausted long ago. Now, he was even bound by the verdant rattan rope, so not to mention struggling, he didn't even have the strength to lift a finger. Don't stare at me like this. In any case, you're dead today. So why don't you relax and enjoy my techniques of torture? I have a variety of techniques that'll absolutely exceed your imagination. Hongzhuo was squatted down and couldn't help but feel even more delighted as he looked at the rage and hatred in Zhao Qinghe's gaze. And he raised his hand to lightly slap Zhao Qinghe's face as he said slowly, "You're a body refiner, right? I'll use a dull blade to slice off your flesh inch by inch, and then I'll place marrow-eater ants all over your body and allow you to watch helplessly as these cute little fellows slowly consume your marrow. Just think about that wonderful process fills me with anticipation." Hongzhuo's voice was gentle and carried a trace of complacency and vileness, yet it seemed to have not produced the slightest effect when it entered Zhao Qinghe's ears. He still puckered his lips unyieldingly as he stared fixedly at Hongzhuo while remaining silent. Hongzhuo stretched out his scarlet-red tongue to lick his dry lips when he saw Zhao Qinghe's appearance, and then he said gloomily with a mocking tone, "You have guts. I like unyielding people like you. There are too few people in this world that unyielding, and this young master has grasped various types of methods of torture. Yet will always hear the shrill cries of surrender and begs of mercy when I haven't finished using all of them. It's too boring. So every time I see an unyielding fellow like you, this young master can't help but be delighted." As he spoke, Hongzhuo raised his leg to slowly step onto Zhao Qinghe's right leg, and then he exerted force with the tip of his foot, causing a crack to resound out. The broken bone pierced through Zhao Qinghe's flesh and skin to reveal a jagged and sharp bone, while scarlet-red blood instantly flowed all over the ground like a stream. The veins on Zhao Qinghe's forehead bulged fiercely from experiencing such suffering while his throat croaked and emitted heavy sounds of breathing. Even then, he still bit his teeth tightly and remained silent. Zhao Qinghe remained silent, nor did he emit the expected shrill cries for mercy. But Hongzhuo didn't care, as this was only the appetizer. He still had a few thousand techniques of torture, and he didn't believe that Zhao Qinghe would be able to endure it forcefully until the end. The tip of Hongzhuo's foot was raised once more before he started to crush Zhao Qinghe's leg bone bit by bit, and his movements were slow and careful, causing him to seem extremely patient. As they looked at Zhao Qinghe laying on the ground while barely breathing, then looked at Hongzhuo who was torturing Zhao Qinghe while having a warm expression on his face, the experts of the Darqian dynasty couldn't help but feel cold in their hearts. These torturing methods of the Crown Prince are truly too perverted. Kill me now if you have the balls. Otherwise, so long as I'm given the slightest hope of survival, I'll surely return today's torture back to you 100-fold. Zhao Qinghe spoke intermittently as blood gurgled out the corners of his mouth, and his voice was low and hoarse as if it was forcefully squeezed out from his chest. Kill you? Wouldn't that be letting you off too easily? Hongzhuo spoke with surprise before pulling an expert of the Darqian dynasty over and asking, "Tell me, if it was you, would you be willing to let him die so easily?" This person that was pulled over hurriedly shook his head. "Absolutely not." Hongzhuo's gaze shot towards the others, and before he could ask, the others shook their heads in unison. "We're unwilling as well." "Haha. Did you hear that? All of them are unwilling to let you die so quickly. So why lose hope and seek death?" Hongzhuo roared with laughter and was extremely complacent. This sort of feeling of holding control over the life and death of another was truly too wonderful. "If anyone dares to kill you, I would be unwilling to let that person die so quickly as well." Right at this moment, a cold and indifferent voice resounded out abruptly from the distance. The voice hadn't descended when a figure had already swiftly appeared by Zhao Qinghe's side, as if the figure had teleported. And the figure was like a ghost that had suddenly appeared with extraordinary speed. Hong Zhu's pupils constricted suddenly as his laughter stopped abruptly before freezing on his face. Whereas, the others were shocked by this sudden change of events to the point of taking a step back. Chen, you've come. When he saw the figure clearly, Zhao Qinghe's breathing suddenly became rapid from excitement, and he'd already fainted before he finished speaking. The humiliation he suffered earlier was too terrible, coupled with the heavy injuries suffered by his body. He was completely exhausted, and he was relying entirely on his last bit of strength to persist until now. As he looked at the terrifying injuries on Zhao Qinghe's body, as he looked at the red and swollen footprints trampled onto Zhao Qinghe's face, and as he looked at the verdant rattan rope that bound Zhao Qinghe, instantly, Xianxia seemed to have become another person. His eyes were icy cold and murderous, the vital energy in his entire body piercingly cold and fierce, and he seemed like a wild beast that had gone berserk and intended to swallow his enemies up. He glanced indifferently at Hong Zhu and the others before squatting down and stretching out his ring finger and index finger to hook onto the rattan rope that bound Zhao Qinghe. After that, this top-grade heaven-rank magic treasure actually shattered inch by inch with ease from a fierce jerk of his. However, when he carried Zhao Qinghe onto his shoulder, his movements were careful and gentle. This was his companion, and no matter how ordinary their relationship was in the past, both of them understood that they were the companions each other could trust the most while in the primeval battlefield. Hong Zhu and the others didn't make a move while Xianxia made this string of movements because their consciousnesses were still in a slightly muddled state, and coupled with their fear towards Xianxia's strength, they didn't dare to rashly make a move. It was truly too unexpected. Hong Zhu and the others were unable to wrap their heads around why Xianxia would descend from the heavens and suddenly appear before them. With a fierce bite of his tongue, the intense pain caused Hong Zhu to recover a trace of clarity, and only now did he notice how idiotic he appeared earlier. Xianxia is only a single person, yet I was terrified to such an extent. What an embarrassment! When he realized this, a trace of embarrassment and rage couldn't help but arise in Hong Zhu's heart as he stared gloomily at Xianxia, who was only 3 m away from him. He seemed to want to see exactly what was extraordinary about this figure that caused the entire primeval battlefield to be in chaos. At the side, the expressions of the experts from the Darqian dynasty had become heavy. Xianxia's current reputation in the primeval battlefield could be said to be like the sun in the midday sky, and his deeds of fighting numerous experts alone on the Isle of Fallen Treasures had even become the hottest topic of discussion lately. So they had no choice but to be on guard when facing a terrifying enemy like this. All of this was done by you? Xianxia raised his hand to wipe off the blood on the corners of Zhao Qinghe's mouth. Yet his gaze was focused on Hong Zhu, and his gaze that were like blades concealed killing intent that was icy cold to the extreme. Exactly. I originally intended him to slice him into pieces before extracting his soul, so that he'll live in torture for eternity. Unfortunately, you've disturbed me. Hong Zhu had already returned to normal, and he said casually, but your arrival is unable to change anything, and you'll instead give away your own life because you saved him. He naturally had the confidence to speak like this. Presently, everyone in his group had already advanced into the rebirth realm, and he didn't believe that they were unable to kill a tiny ant from an ordinary dynasty. As for the various rumors related to Xianxia, he didn't take them seriously. Rumors were only rumors in the end, and they couldn't be trusted. Not to mention if he was terrified to the point of withdrawing just because he heard his enemy's strength was extremely formidable, then he wouldn't be the crown prince of the Darqian dynasty. Then all of them were watching the show from the side? Xianxia remained unmoved, yet his gaze swept the other 5 people by Hong Zhu's side as he continued asking coldly. Exactly. A thing like killing someone has always been extremely brilliant, so it's worthy of being watched and enjoyed. What do you think? Hong Zhu thought Xianxia was afraid of his strength because Xianxia hadn't dared to make a move after so long, and he felt even more at ease in his heart. So, his voice even carried a trace of an insufferably arrogant tone that was unique to him when he spoke. Very good. Xianxia suddenly turned around and spoke towards the side. Both of you stay at the side and watch the show as well. Watch and enjoy my method of killing and see if it's worthy of the word brilliant." As soon as he finished speaking, Hong Zhuo and the others saw that two more streaks flashed over from the distant sky. It was a man and a woman, and they were precisely Huangfu Qingying and young Master Zhou. Both of them glanced at Zhao Qinghe, who was on Chen Shi's shoulder, and instantly understood what had happened, causing the gazes they shot at Hong Zhuo and the others to become icy cold. "Give him to me." Young Master Zhou moved forward and took the initiative to carry the fainted Zhao Qinghe. Chen Shi's words from before carried an unquestionable tone, and he knew that it was best to act according to Chen Shi's wishes at a time like this. Moreover, he believed that Chen Shi had the ability to deal with everything that was before them. Huangfu Qingying glanced at Chen Shi, then glanced at Hong Zhuo and the others before similarly doing as Chen Shi said. But she still stood at the side while vigilantly paying attention to the surroundings and carefully taking precautions. They seemed to have already formed a tacit understanding. Both of them didn't disturb Chen Shi when they saw the scene before them, and allowing him to kill all the enemies by himself was the most suitable action to take at this moment. Even though Chen Shi's cultivation seemed as if he'd just advanced into the rebirth realm, but if anyone really took him to be a ripe persimmon that could be squashed at will, then the consequences that person faced would perfectly explain how stupid and brainless the person's perception was. "Humph! You're simply courting death. You think you can run wild just because two more of your assistants have arrived." Hong Zhuo casually glanced at Huangfu Qingying and young Master Zhou before grunting coldly with disdain. "This is good as well. I'll let all of you experience exactly how great the difference between ordinary dynasties and the experts of first-rate dynasties is." Hong Zhuo's voice hadn't finished resounding out in the air when a strand of a clear and melodious sword howl suddenly resounded out in the heavens and the earth. At this instant, Chen Shi had chosen to make a move. His killing intent had already been held back to the limit. He needed to vent, he needed to erupt, and he wasn't willing to say another word nor waste another bit of time. Hong Zhuo wasn't a simple-minded and conceited person. Conversely, his thoughts were even more experienced and scheming than an ordinary person. During the time he was speaking with Chen Shi, he was sending voice transmissions to the other people by his side. "Chen Shi has arrived, and it's just nice for us to seize this opportunity to annihilate him. Everyone, as soon as I say the word, form the formation and kill him." All these experts of the Darqian dynasty had experienced hundreds of battles, so all of their expressions remained unchanged when they heard this, yet they'd secretly already made preparations to make a move. However, they didn't expect that Chen Shi would have made a move first before Hong Zhuo's voice finished resounding out. Sword howls stretched out like the tide and shook the surroundings as an extremely vast sword chi charged into the sky and emitted brilliant might. This sword chi was coiled with blazing divine lights. The trajectory of the stellar bodies were drawn within it while it contained the changes between the five elements yin and yang, and when looked at from afar, the heavens, earth, and space were trembling violently before collapsing and crumbling. They were utterly unable to endure the might contained within the sword strike. "Shit! Form the formation." Hong Zhuo's pupils constricted abruptly when he saw this scene, and he cried out loudly, "Bang!" Unfortunately, his reaction was still a beat slower. This sword strike of Chen Shi's contained boundless killing intent and hatred, and his powerful sword strike appeared before the expert closest to him in the blink of an eye before slashing down. It directly blasted the expert apart into a ball of mush, causing the person to not even have the chance to let out a shrill cry. Hong Zhuo and the others were both terrified and furious when they saw this scene, and they didn't dare believe that merely a single sword strike had already caused one of the rebirth realm experts on their side to perish. On the other hand, Huangfu Qingying and young Master Zhou that were watching from the side were extremely astounded. That was a rebirth realm expert, yet he died just like that? "Quickly, form the formation and kill him." Hong Zhuo's shoulders were broad, his face craggy, and he carried a strong aura of nobility. At this moment, as soon as he made a move, his entire body erupted with a ball of bright light that caused him to look like the scorching sun. A divine will floated in the sky, causing him to seem like a devil god, and he revealed the shocking, imposing aura of the crown prince of a first-rate dynasty. Behind him, the other four people stood around each other, while similarly emanating the terrifying aura of rebirth realm experts. and they formed a grand formation with Xianxia, who was in the lead. Bang! At the same time, Xianxia raised his hand to toss out a treasure that seemed like a disc that had the 8 diagrams inscribed on it. The disc was ancient and enormous with gray mist coiled around it, and the mist formed into dragons and WRMs that floated in midair. It was as if the beginning of the world was playing out once more, and it kept the elements of the world in place while emitting surging divine light that enveloped Xianxia and the others within it. Instantly, the aura of the 5 of them was linked up and synchronized with each other, and they actually formed a strange grand formation. It was like the pattern of the 5 elements, and Xianxia resided within it and acted as the core of the formation. An astonishing scene appeared. The aura on Xianxia's body rose steadily like a bamboo shoot that received rainfall after a long drought, and it swiftly rose explosively and seemed to be about to transform at any moment. Xianxia, you're dead. Did you think all of us are so easy to deal with? You're truly naive. Peiyu isn't the only one in the world who possesses a heavenly immortal's decree to rely on. I, Xianxia, similarly possess this 6-light heaven-fuse formation as my trump card. Now that I've fused with the entire strength of another 4 rebirth realm experts, isn't killing you an extremely easy thing to accomplish? After he obtained the assistance of the 6-light heaven-fuse formation, Xianxia seemed to have become confident, and he soared up amidst his savage and explosive shout. Rumble! The heavens collapsed as the earth split apart. Xianxia carried along the strength of the other 4 rebirth realm cultivators while blasting a punch towards Xianxia. Xianxi's gaze was icy cold, his face completely expressionless, and he silently watched Xianxia's attack without moving in the slightest. When the terrifying force blasted out to arrive right before him, he raised his arm and punched out. Countless thunderstorm vortexes suddenly surged out from this punch, while the lightning Dao insight that was only a step away from perfection filled it, and it developed a horrifying strength that desired to destroy the world. As his fist struck out, one could notice that his fist had already transformed into the eye of a storm, and countless thunderstorm vortexes crackled as they ceaselessly scraped against each other and shook the sky. The fists collided with each other. Bang! With the 2 of them as the center, circle after circle of ripples stretched out. It was ripples of an enormous force, and everywhere it passed, everything transformed into ash and nothing remained. Amidst these ripples, the disc-shaped magic treasure above Xianxia wailed intensely and was on the verge of collapse, whereas blood even sprayed out the mouths of the 4 people by Xianxia's side as they staggered back. In a single strike, the 6-light heaven-fuse formation was actually almost destroyed by Xianxia. What's going on? Xianxia, how can your strength be so formidable? What divine ability was that? Xianxia's face went pale as he seemed to not dare believe that he was actually almost unable to go against Xianxia after gathering the strength of 5 people, causing him to roar loudly and repeatedly. I don't believe I'm unable to kill you. Dragon Emperor Scripture. Rumble. Suddenly, enormous dragon phantoms appeared one after the other around Xianxia's body, and the roars of a myriad of dragons rose and fell. It seemed as if a group of dragons were chanting a scripture that transformed into an expanse of brilliant golden light before raining down and enveloping Xianxia's entire body. Instantly, a forked dragon horn actually grew on his head, and it was completely covered in golden scales and emitted a lofty and terrifying aura of an emperor. With a grab of his hand, all the thunderstorm vortexes were obliterated, and then he took a step forward and actually appeared extremely close to Xianxia. His eyes opened up, seeming like the ancestor of dragons had awoken to deter the world. Right at this instant, time seemed to have stopped as a divine will appeared behind Xianxia, and then a crimson glow tainted the sky red and illuminated the world. It emitted boundless light as a fan that emanated the glow of flames appeared in his hands. Quasi-immortal artifact, flaming peacock fan. This quasi-immortal artifact was refined from the feathers of the nether peacock king, and with a single fan of it, flames cleared the sky and incinerated the world. At the instant it appeared, it released a surging sea of flames that were like lava as they surged out. Rumble. The sea of flames surged, and numerous traces of being burned to the point of cracking appeared in the sky at the instant the sea of flames appeared. In the sky, Expanse after expanse of the sky rumbled as if an earthquake was occurring on land, and countless pieces of space fell down as if the sky was collapsing. It instantly broke apart the six-light heaven-fuse formation, causing the aura of dragons that surrounded Hong Zhou to dissipate while the roars of dragons turned to wails, and his entire body was blasted flying. On the other hand, the four people by his side were burned by the sea of flames, causing them to emit shrill cries before being instantly transformed into ash and vanishing completely. The might of a single strike was terrifying to such an extent. Huangfu Qingying and young Master Zhou looked at each other when they saw this scene, and they were shocked to the point they couldn't help but gasp in their hearts. They'd entirely never imagined that Chen Shi, who'd advanced to the rebirth realm, would actually be able to erupt with such a terrifying might with a quasi-immortal artifact in hand, and it was simply to the point he was capable of annihilating anything that stood before him. For a time, only Hong Zhou remained in the battlefield. His aura was in chaos, and the golden scales on his body and the dragon horn on his head became dim and lusterless before vanishing in the next moment. Impossible! Even if a rebirth realm expert possesses a quasi-immortal artifact, it would at most be possible to exert half its might, whereas you've only just advanced. So how could you possibly exert more than 70% of the might of a quasi-immortal artifact? Hong Zhou's entire body was trembling as he looked at Chen Shi with astonishment, and he backed up repeatedly with the intention of fleeing. He'd already affirmed that all the rumors related to Chen Shi were true. Chen Shi, who'd overcome the phoenix tribulation of rebirth, already possessed the potential to become an exalted figure, and not to mention sweeping through numerous experts. Even surmounting a realm to annihilate enemies wouldn't be difficult for Chen Shi. Chen Shi was truly too terrifying. When facing such an enemy, Hong Zhou had no choice but to flee. His pride, self-esteem, and all his thoughts had been crushed in the strike from before, and he was distressed and in a state of anxiety. Chen Shi was expressionless as the Starsky wings flapped, and in the next moment, he'd already arrived behind Hong Zhou before stretching his hand out to directly press onto Hong Zhou's back. Bang! Hong Zhou was directly blasted down from midair and fiercely smashed into the hard rocks on the ground, and he smashed out a pit on the ground. Blood sprayed from his mouth and nose, and countless bones within his body had been broken and emitted cracking sounds that instilled terror in others. But even then, he still struggled to stand up, and he disregarded his mutilated face as he fled once more. He knew that if he fell into Chen Shi's hands, then the consequences would be even more horrifying to how he treated Zhao Qinghe. Bang! Another palm slapped down, causing Hong Zhou to be blasted once more into the ground, and he was like a pitiful ant that was helpless and mercilessly trampled on, causing him to seem extremely miserable. This time, it was impossible for him to crawl up again. This strike had directly blasted apart the flesh on his body to the point ghastly bones were revealed. Most of these bones were broken and mixed together with the shattered meridians and flesh in his body, causing it to be an extremely bloody scene. You can't kill me. I'm the crown prince of the Darqian dynasty. If you dare kill me, then you're going against the Darqian dynasty. At that time, not to mention you, even the Darchu dynasty will be annihilated. As he looked at Chen Shi, who walked step by step towards him, Hong Zhou couldn't endure the terror in his heart any longer, and he cried out hysterically. He was completely afraid. A crown prince from a first-rate dynasty like him possessed extraordinary natural talent and formidable magic treasures, and he got anything he wanted. Even when he entered the primeval battlefield that was extremely dangerous, his path was completely smooth and there was nothing he was unable to accomplish. But now, he'd been completely defeated by Chen Shi within just a few moves. So how could an outcome like this not cause him to be terrified? It wasn't that he hadn't seen experts, but it was the first time he'd encountered such a heaven-defying expert like Chen Shi. He even suspected that it was impossible for experts at the second, third, or even fourth tempering of the rebirth realm to be a match for Chen Shi. I naturally won't kill you. I want to keep you alive and let Qinghe deal with you. Chen Shi grabbed Hong Zhou up as if he was grabbing up a chick, and then he twisted and broke Hong Zhou's limbs with a raise of his hand before he said coldly, "Didn't you say one must know how to enjoy and watch someone kill? What do you think now? Was my method of killing brilliant?" Hong Zhou glanced once more at Chen she who had an indifferent expression when he heard this. Even if Hongzhu's entire body was filled with intense pain, he couldn't help but shudder as he stared at Xianxia resentfully, and he remained silent, yet his heart was filled with extreme fear. Even though he liked to torture and kill his opponents, when he thought about how he might be tortured and killed by another with every means possible, he had the impulse of wanting to die as soon as possible in his heart. Don't attempt suicide. Otherwise, I'll let you know what it is like to be overwhelmed with pain to the point death is better than living. Xianxia's icy cold and indifferent voice sounded out by his ears, causing Hongzhu to instantly give up the thought of seeking death in his heart. And he was in extreme despair. He knew that everything was over. This place was a valley that was extremely common in the primeval battlefield, with winding and flowing clear streams that emitted gurgling and melodious sounds. Clusters of wild flowers grew on the stream's banks while multicolored butterflies fluttered about, causing the scene to be rather elegant. Xianxia sat cross-legged by the river bank and was organizing the various materials in his possession. In terms of battle, he was still most skilled in the sword Dao, but the current might of the talisman armament was obviously incapable of satisfying his requirements in battle, so he intended to refine the talisman armament once more in the near future. What are you doing? Huangfu Qingying had a smile on her face as she walked over. Her dress fluttered in the wind as her body swayed, causing her graceful and slender body to reveal shocking charm as she sat by Xianxia's side. I'm organizing my things. I intend to refine my sword a little bit. Xianxia replied casually. Presently, he'd already gathered all the materials, and all he lacked was to carry out the refinement. The talisman armament was different from an ordinary magic treasure. It possessed infinite space for improvement, and if its quality improved a step further, its might would be entirely capable of comparing with a quasi-immortal artifact. But the refining process was extremely difficult and troublesome, and it was even to the extent that a slight mistake could possibly destroy all the materials. For the sake of avoiding such a situation from occurring, Xianxia had to first thoroughly figure out the attributes of each material and organize them before he could take the next step. When she saw Xianxia, she concentrated on the various materials before him. Huangfu Qingying puckered her lips as she smiled. Then she didn't disturb him any further before quietly sitting by his side, and this action caused her to feel extremely relaxed in her heart. When they were in the Darchu dynasty before this, she hadn't paid much attention to Xianxia because as the daughter of Emperor Chu, it was utterly impossible for her to pay attention to Xianxia as well, and it was only when the all-star meeting began that she saw Xianxia for the first time. At that time, she felt it was a matter of course that Xianxia was an insignificant follower of her big sister Yiqing. Coupled with Yiqing asking her to take care of Xianxia on numerous occasions later on, she felt that not only was Xianxia a follower of Yiqing's, he was even a fellow that depended on women and specialized in taking advantage of her big sister Yiqing, causing her to be rather unhappy. But now, she wouldn't think like this, and it could even be said that she was the one that depended on Xianxia now and was protected by him all the time. Even she hadn't realized that Xianxia had already become the friend that she trusted the most. Unfortunately, he has too many women. As she tilted her head to stare at the side of Xianxia's face that had a manly outline, the peerlessly beautiful appearance of Qing Xiui, Fan Yunlan, Yiqing, and the other women flashed unconsciously in Huangfu Qingying's mind, and she sighed faintly in her heart. These women were either peerlessly beautiful like celestial maidens that had descended to the world or gorgeous and seductive with extraordinary allure. Every single one of them was so extraordinary, so outstanding, and when compared with them, even with Huangfu Qingying's pride, she had to admit that no matter which aspect it was, she was unable to stand above all of them and would at most be on par with them. Has Qinghe still not returned? Xianxia's voice suddenly sounded out by her ear, and it jolted awake Huangfu Qingying from her disordered thoughts. She was stunned for a moment before she shook her head and smiled. No. 6 hours have already passed. I wonder to what extent has he tortured Hongzhu? But it's good for him to vent it as well. If it was me, I would absolutely not kill Hongzhu so easily either. Just as they were speaking, a wave of footsteps resounded out from afar, and Zhao Qinghe and young Master Zhou walked over. Zhao Qinghe's expression was cold and calm, and merely from his outward appearance, one could perceive a relaxed expression from completely venting the hatred and resentment in his heart. whereas young Master Zhou beside him had a horrified expression instead, and he seemed to have been provoked by something, causing his gaze to carry a trace of a strange expression when he looked at Zhao Qinghe. "How was it?" Chun 11 stood up and asked with a smile on his face. "I didn't kill him. He said he wanted me to be unable to have a proper death for eternity, so I want him to have a taste of it." Zhao Qinghe flipped his palm and a translucent treasure that seemed like a crystal appeared on it. And she could clearly see that Hongzhu's soul core was confined within it while roaring and struggling hysterically with an extremely miserable appearance. Young Master Zhou seemed to have recalled some sort of terrible scene when he heard this, causing him to seem as if he wanted to vomit, yet was unable to, and he was like that for a long time before squeeze out a few words. "This fellow is too disgusting. I don't want to see how he tortures others ever again, even if I have to die." Huangfu Qingying was instantly stunned. Since young Master Zhou could become disgusted to such an extent, it was obvious that the method of torture this fellow Zhao Qinghe used was extremely brutal and horrifying. She didn't pay attention to all this instead, and he only suggested, "Allowing his soul core to exist seems as if he's suffering torment at all times, yet it's actually giving him a slight chance of survival. What if his soul core is rescued? He would be entirely capable of seizing another's body to be reborn." Zhao Qinghe was stunned, and he nodded as he said, "I didn't consider this. I'll annihilate him right away." She shook his head and said, "Don't. If you think you haven't finished venting your anger, then how about allowing his soul core to seize the body of an animal and then wipe out his mental capabilities? It wouldn't be a bad idea to make him stay forever with animals before perishing on his own." Making the dignified crown prince of the Darqian dynasty seize the body of an animal and without any mental capability. Huangfu Qingying and young Master Zhou couldn't help but shudder in unison when they heard this. And only now did they notice that if it was in terms of skill in torture, she was even more horrifying and cruel than Zhao Qinghe. But this suggestion caused Zhao Qinghe to smile with satisfaction instead, and he flashed right away towards the valley. It wasn't long before he slowly led a drooling beast over. The drooling beast's appearance was hideous. It had a fat body and a wide mouth filled with protruding teeth, and its entire body emitted an extremely stinky mucus, causing it to be extremely disgusting. It was a type of common demon beast within the primeval battlefield, and even though it was weak, no one would make a move against it. It couldn't be helped, it was truly too smelly, so not to mention possessing any materials that could be utilized, even its flesh was stinky to the point of being able to stink a person to death. Obviously, Zhao Qinghe had sealed Hongzhu's soul core within this beast's body before wiping out its mental capability, causing it to have an idiotic appearance and be entirely incapable of recognizing Shi and the others. Huangfu Qingying and young Master Zhou couldn't help but shudder again when they saw this scene, and they couldn't help but rejoice in their hearts that they weren't the enemies of Shi and Zhao Qinghe. Otherwise it would be too terrifying. Because of being worried about the safety of Zhenlu Qing and Qing Shui, Shi and the others didn't continue staying here, and they flashed up into the air before flying towards the teleportation formation in the northwest. On the way, Shi was extremely moved when he found out that Zhao Qinghe had been ambushed by Hongzhu and the others while coming to save him, and he never expected that this fellow who had an outward appearance that was cold like a rock would actually be so considerate and warm-hearted. But when he heard that not only had Lu Xiao who came to save him died because of him, Lu Xiao had even died at the hands of Huangfu Changtian. Shi's expression instantly sank, and he felt both guilty and furious in his heart. Moreover, this extremely complicated feelings almost provoked him to the point of losing control of his killing intent. Huangfu Qingying and young Master Zhou were similarly furious to the extreme, as they never imagined that Huangfu Changtian would actually assist their enemies and help an outsider to harm their own companions. Such despicable and shameless actions were simply unforgivable and deserving of death. Right? I forgot something. After Huangfu Changtian caused the death of Lu Xiao, he was sent by Hongzhu to gather with the members of the Darqian dynasty, with the intention of using his jade token once again to harm the other members of our Darchu dynasty. Zhao Qinghe suddenly seemed to have thought of something, and his face went grim as he spoke swiftly. What? Killing Lu Xiao isn't enough, and he still wants to harm the others? Huangfu Qingying's eyes stared wide open like saucers, and she was angered to the point her entire body trembled because she never expected that this fellow would actually be despicable to such an extent. That bastard really deserves death. Does he think he can run wild just because he attached himself to a first-rate dynasty? Young Master Zhou gnashed his teeth as he said, "If news of this is sent back to the Darchu dynasty, then the wise king's estate will become the public enemy of the entire cultivation world within a single day, and exterminating the wise king's estate can only be considered to be letting them off easily. Brother Zhao, do you know where exactly Huangfu Changtian is?" She took a deep breath as he worked hard to keep himself calm. He knew that it was useless no matter how furious he got at this moment, and the pressing matter at the moment was to swiftly discover Huangfu Changtian's whereabouts before eliminating this black sheep. Zhao Qinghe frowned and pondered deeply for a long time before he said, "There's only less than 3 months before the final test of the primeval battlefield, so the members of the Darshan dynasty would have already started rushing towards Primeval City for sure. If my guess isn't wrong, then Huangfu Changtian has probably gone over there." The Primeval City? Xianxia muttered to himself, and he couldn't help but recall Qing Xiui and Jinlu Qing, causing his mood to become even heavier. Calamities rarely do come alone. Qing Xiui and Jinlu Qing have joined up with the disciples of a prestigious clan from an ancient kingdom, and their fate is unknown. Now, a black sheep like Huangfu Changtian has appeared. The situation has undoubtedly become even more serious than I thought. Let's go. We'll rush over to Primeval City at full speed. After pondering silently for a long time, Xianxia understood that if he wanted to resolve everything, then he must first rush to Primeval City. This place was a boundless expanse of flat and barren land covered with brown-colored rocks, and at the center was a stone formation that emitted a hazy sheen. The stone formation only covered an area of 30 m, and its surface was inscribed with countless dense and complicated talisman markings. When bathed in the hazy rays of light, it emitted a strange spatial tremor that caused the surrounding space to seem as if it had warped. This was the ancient teleportation formation that led to Primeval City, and only one that possessed a cultivation at the rebirth realm was capable of resisting the spatial tremors within the teleportation formation to be instantly teleported to Primeval City. As for one with a cultivation below the rebirth realm, the cultivator would be instantly minced apart by the spatial tremors that surrounded the teleportation formation as soon as the cultivator stepped foot near it, and there was no possibility of survival. At this moment, there were groups of 2 or 3 cultivators entering the teleportation formation, and with a flicker of the talisman markings, it teleported batch after batch of cultivators to Primeval City. Swoosh! 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 A wave of the sound of the sky being torn apart sounded out as Chen Shi, Huangfu Qingying, young Master Zhou, and Zhao Qinghe flashed over to appear in the sky 3 kilometers away from the teleportation formation. This is a teleportation formation. It contains the spatial Grand Tao, and only an earthly immortal realm talisman formation Grandmaster is capable of setting one up. She stared at the distant teleportation formation, and a strand of dense curiosity couldn't help but arise in his heart. He'd indeed heard of teleportation formations in the past, yet it was the first time he saw one with his own 2 eyes. Chenxi? All of you are here as well. Right when Qianxi was sizing up the teleportation formation, a few streaks flashed over from afar once more, and one of the people amongst these streaks couldn't help but cry out with pleasant surprise upon noticing Qianxi and the others. Qianxi was stunned, and then he turned and looked over. He saw a chubby and white fat young man that wore a gray robe and held a smile on his face waving at him, and he couldn't help but be surprised. Ling Yu. The fatty was precisely Ling Yu, and beside him was another man and woman, Ling Zhe and Bai Ling Yun. Ling Zhe nodded with a smile when he saw Qianxi, whereas Bai Ling Yun's expression was complicated as she puckered her lips and remained silent. Couldn't be helped, as she'd almost killed Qianxi in the past, and later on, Qianxi had almost killed her. Even though the enmity between them had already been resolved, but they were neither friend nor foe when they saw each other now, so it was slightly awkward in the end. I intended to make a trip to the Isle of Fallen Treasures to see which ignorant fellow was bullying Brother Chun, but my older brother said you're already safe and sound, so I felt at ease and intended to head to Primeval City. I never imagined that I would actually be able to encounter all of you here. It's truly great. As he spoke, Ling Yu had already flashed over, and his chubby face was covered in a smile. Obviously, meeting Chen Shi and the others caused him to be extremely happy. It's good that you're alive. Huangfu Qingying seemed to have heaved a sigh of relief, and she spoke words that Ling Yu felt were extremely strange. At the side, young Master Zhou moved forward and struck his fist onto Ling Yu's shoulder as he laughed. I never noticed that you're quite virtuous, fatty. Alright, you're a friend of mine for sure just because of this. Ling Yu rubbed his head and revealed a silly smile along with young Master Zhou, and he seemed to be extremely simple. All of your heading to Primeval City as well? Meanwhile, Ling Zhe had walked over and smiled as he spoke out to Chen Shi. Yeah. Chen Shi nodded. Ling Yu being safe and sound caused him to be relieved as well. Earlier, he was really worried that Huangfu Changtian would harm Ling Yu, and now that he saw Ling Yu was with his older brother, Ling Zhe, she didn't have to worry about Ling Yu's safety. After all, Ling Zhe was from one of the three top dynasties, the Dartang dynasty, whereas the Darshan dynasty was only a first-rate dynasty, so no matter how audacious they were, they wouldn't dare rashly make a move against Ling Zhe's younger brother. Ling Zhe's opinion of She was rather good, so he grinned and invited right away. I can be considered to know a little bit about the Primeval City, so how about we head over together? Then I'll thank Brother Ling first, said Chen Shi with a smile. Ling Zhe was from the Dartang dynasty, and the information he came into contact with was much better than Chen Shi and the others, so setting out with Ling Zhe was an extremely good choice indeed. But Ling Zhe frowned and hesitated for a short moment before he looked Chen Shi in the eye and said seriously, Brother Chen, there's something I must make clear with you beforehand so as to avoid it affecting the friendship between us. Chen Shi was stunned, and his expression became serious as well. Brother Ling, you can be frank. Ling Zhe seemed to find it difficult to speak it out, yet he still gritted his teeth and said, Brother Chen, you already know now that two companions of yours are with the disciples of the Shang clan, and their situation seems to not be good. If a fight breaks out between you and the disciples of the Shang clan because of this, I myself would surely choose to assist all of you, but I can't represent the Dartang dynasty when I do this. When he spoke up to hear, Ling Zhe paused for a moment and said with a bitter smile on his face, After all, there's no enmity or dispute between the Shang clan and my Dartang dynasty. If I help you while representing the Dartang dynasty, then I would be doing injustice to those companions of mine, and it's truly difficult for me to do this. Chen Shi laughed lightheartedly. So it was this matter. If it was me, I'd surely do as Brother Ling has done. So you must not feel guilty because of this, Brother Ling, because if you do, then we can only temporarily split up from you. He did indeed approve of Ling Zhe's point of view. If Ling Zhe took on all things as soon as he came over, then he would seem to be too insincere instead, and it would be utterly impossible for Chen Shi to believe him. Since Ling Zhe was able to frankly and sincerely speak clearly about all this, he'd obviously taken Chen Shi to be a friend, and Chen Shi wasn't an idiot, so he would naturally understand everything. It was precisely because of this that Chen Shi had a better impression of Ling Zhe instead. A person that knew his limits and acted in good faith was someone worthy to be taken as a friend, right? Without wasting any more time, Chen Shi's group walked into the teleportation formation after converging with Ling Zhe's group. As soon as Chen Shi steadied himself within the teleportation formation, a spatial fluctuation that couldn't be resisted suddenly vibrated out violently. At that instant, it was like he'd experienced the boundless river of time, and the scene before him warped into a multicolored ripple that was dreamlike and illusory. This is spatial teleportation? It really is extremely marvelous. Before Chen Shi could finish sighing with emotion, the scene before his eyes flashed, and he'd already arrived at an unfamiliar place. The sky was clear blue with white clouds all over, and the sky was vast and pure to the point it was like glowing and translucent glass. As a cool breeze blew in the surroundings, spirit energy that was dense like a mist drifted in the air, and strands of the aura of plants and earth followed the breeze, and it refreshed the mind. Within the primeval battlefield that was mostly filled with dangerous and adverse environments, everything in this place seemed to be so out of the ordinary. When Chen Shi thoughtlessly glanced about, he saw that an extremely vast and ancient city was shockingly standing towering on the boundless plains before him. The city walls, constructed from enormous rocks, were stretched out for an unknown distance, were 3 kilometers tall, and were dim and mottled. It seemed to have experienced the corrosion of countless years, causing it to emit an ancient and aged aura. When looked at from afar, this city was like a lion that was in slumber for countless years, and even though its might had faded, its aura still remained. Primeval City was constructed in ancient times, and it was the base camp of the gods during their expedition. At that time, the numerous gods from the 3 dimensions and peak experts from countless worlds had gathered here, so this city was constructed to be extremely vast and magnificent. But unfortunately, after the end of the battle and after countless years until now, there hasn't been a god that has descended to this city any longer, and it gradually went into a decline. Ling Zhe's voice resounded out by their years, and it carried a trace of emotion and reminiscence. He seemed to have looked back to ancient times and the numerous brilliant scenes of history that had once occurred here. Chen Shi, on the other hand, had an entirely different feeling. No matter how magnificent a city in this world was, or how shocking an expert was, they were unable to go against the corrosion of endless time in the end. Before the merciless passage of time, he even doubted that there were really eternal cities and experts that lived forever with the world in this world. Moreover, he wondered if heavenly immortals were really capable of living forever like the world without knowing death, sickness, or age. Perhaps only by wandering about myself, taking a look, and experiencing it myself would I be able to pry into the truth behind all of this. The expression of emotion within Chen Shi's eyes vanished gradually, and it was replaced by an unshakable and firm expression to transcend. I'll think about future matters in the future, whereas now, so long as I work hard every step I take, then no matter if I achieve my heart's desires, at least I'll have a clear conscience. When they saw that even though this ancient city that had stood since ancient times until now was modeled, its aura still remained, Huangfu Qingying and the others were shocked in their hearts and were speechless for a long time. This was the base camp of the gods during their expedition, and the traces of the gods of the 3 dimensions and the peak experts of countless worlds had been left behind here, and all of this caused them to be shocked. Let's go. The experts of many powers have probably already gathered in the city. Everyone must be careful, as the city doesn't have any order and everything depends on strength, causing deaths to occur frequently. Ling Zhe shook his head as his expression became serious as well, and he instructed them before flashing towards the distant primeval city. Chen Shi and the others recalled the objective of their journey this time, and they instantly returned to their senses and steadied their minds before following closely behind Ling Zhe. The closer they got to primeval city, the more they were able to feel how magnificent and ancient the city was, and they were even able to see numerous expanses of marks that could only be left behind from battle on the modeled walls. Obviously, even though this city was extremely magnificent all those years ago, it had experienced countless battles and wars. According to the information I just obtained, the rebirth realm experts of the 7 first-rate dynasties, 3 top dynasties, and prestigious clans from ancient kingdoms have arrived at Primeval City from all over. Comparatively speaking, not many people from ordinary dynasties have arrived. Ling Zhe flew as he said, "As for people from weak dynasties, they'll probably be unable to come here. Indeed, many people have probably already died in the others' places within the primeval battlefield before this for the sake of seizing treasures in the various restricted areas, secret realms, and ruins, and most of them were surely disciples of ordinary and weak dynasties. After all, no matter if we admit it or not, compared to the powers like first-rate dynasties, the resources, reserves, and strength of ordinary and weak dynasties are greatly inferior, and death is unable to be avoided." Chen Shi sighed. This was a brutal fact, yet they had to accept it. Otherwise, even though there were so many dynasties that had entered the primeval battlefield, yet there would be no need to differentiate between weak, ordinary, first-rate, and so on and so forth. The levels created a gap, and it was truly difficult to reduce this gap. Not long after, Chen Shi and the others had already arrived before a city gate that was tall and lofty. At this moment, there were 2 or 3 cultivators frequently flashing by before the city gate that seemed to be constructed from bronze. The auras of these people were deep and thick, and every single one of them possessed cultivations at the rebirth realm. Obviously, they were the experts of other dynasties. But what caused Chun Shi and the others to be astonished the most was that there were actually a few tens of figures blocking before the city gate, and behind them was a flag stuck into the ground. On the flag was the scene of a vast flowing river that seemed lifelike. What's going on? Chun Shi slowed down and couldn't help but frown. The 8 city gates of Primeval City correspond to the 8 directions. This is the northwest door to Primeval City, and based on that flag, it has obviously been taken control of by the Luo River Kingdom's Shang clan. Ling Zhe seemed to not be surprised as he explained via voice transmission. When the powers that enter Primeval City feel their strengths are sufficiently strong, they take control of a city gate to display their might. Of course, they can also use this to amass a fortune. Luo River Kingdom's Shang clan, Chun Shi muttered in his heart. Never had he imagined that he hadn't even entered Primeval City, yet would first encounter the disciples of the Shang clan. Amass a fortune? What do you mean by this? The nearby Ling Yu muttered. Just take a look and you'll find out, said Ling Zhe. Fellow Taoists, this city gate has already been taken over by my Luo River Kingdom's Shang clan. If you want to enter, then every single person must pay with something that possesses a wealth not inferior to a top-grade heaven-rank magic treasure. Right when Ling Zhe finished speaking, a cold, indifferent, and arrogant voice swiftly resounded out from the city gate, and the voice contained a shocking true essence fluctuation that caused the expressions of many people that were present at the scene to become stiff. If we want to enter the city gate, then every single person must pay the price of something that isn't inferior to a top-grade heaven-rank magic treasure in value. As they looked at the numerous Shang clan disciples that controlled the city gate, all the people in the surroundings were indignant. Every single one of them was a top expert from their respective dynasties, and when faced with such a method of entrance that was like robbery, they naturally felt extremely dislike. The Primeval City doesn't belong to anyone, yet all of you have actually taken control of the city gate and are forcefully requesting treasures for entrance? Aren't all of you going too far? I never imagined that as disciples from a prestigious clan from the ancient kingdoms, all of you are able to carry out such bandit-like actions. I truly feel embarrassed for your ancestors. Some people were instantly unable to help but sneer repeatedly. A top-grade heaven-rank magic treasure was naturally nothing to them, but these robbing actions caused them to be unable to stomach it. One had to stay unyielding as they lived their lives, and no one was willing to be robbed of their wealth like this. Bang! 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 However, right when everyone refused to comply, something was thrown abruptly from above the city wall, and it fell heavily onto the ground before causing an expanse of dust and dirt to suffuse the air. Besides that, there was even blood that sprayed out from it and the sound of bones breaking. Everyone raised their eyes to look, and their pupils constricted abruptly. Shockingly, it was a bloody corpse. This person's name was Wu Yu, and he was from some dynasty called Cloud Spirit Dynasty. He was unwilling to pay the price to enter the city earlier, so he fell to such an end. If all of you are disgruntled, feel free to try as well. The cold, indifferent, and arrogant voice sounded out once more from outside the city gate, and it revealed a trace of ghastly killing intent and was filled with a threatening tone. The atmosphere instantly became still when they saw this scene. The corpse on the ground was surely a rebirth realm expert before death. Otherwise, it was impossible to arrive at Primeval City. Yet now, the rebirth realm expert had become a badly mutilated and icy cold corpse, and this sanguinary reality caused everyone to clearly realize something. This was the primeval battlefield, and there were no restraints or order here. If one wanted to survive here, then strength was the best guarantee. Simply speaking, the person with the biggest fist had the greatest power of control and authority. Forget it, Shang Ping, let them in. The young master has encountered successive happy events today, and his mood is very good, so he can't be exposed to killing. Right at this moment, a cold and sharp voice suddenly resounded out, and it was mixed with surging true essence as it sounded out from within the city gate like a sharp bolt of lightning that pierced the ears of others to the point it hurt. Moreover, when this voice resounded out, an enormous pressure stretched out along with it, and this pressure circulated endlessly, causing the countenance of everyone present to instantly go pale. Fifth tempering of the rebirth realm? Everyone was extremely astonished, as only a cultivator at the fifth tempering of the rebirth realm was capable of allowing the cultivator's aura to circulate ceaselessly like the five elements. In other words, the person that spoke earlier had a strength that was at least at the fifth tempering of the rebirth realm. Xianxi's eyes squinted slightly, as he never expected that besides Shang Kuan, there was actually another disciple amongst the Shang clan disciples that had attained a cultivation at the fifth tempering of the rebirth realm, as expected of the disciples of a prestigious clan from an ancient kingdom. Such a cultivation is entirely capable of crushing most of the experts that enter Primeval City. No wonder they dare take control of the northwest gate of Primeval City. Huangfu Qingying muttered to herself, and she couldn't help but turn to glance at Qianxi. Qianxi smiled as he indicated for her to be at ease with his gaze, as he naturally knew what Huangfu Qingying was worried about. Presently, Qing Shui and Jin Luqing were with the disciples of the Shang clan, and their situation wasn't good, so if they wanted to rescue the two of them, they couldn't avoid the occurrence of battles with the Shang clan. Now, after they witnessed the strength of the Shang clan disciples with their own two eyes, it was understandable that Huangfu Qingying's mood was heavy. Big brother Shang Ke, has young master already succeeded? After all Shang clan disciples that stood on guard before the city gate heard this voice, their spirits were refreshed, and one of them couldn't help but ask. He only has to take one final step, right? Guard the city gate carefully. Even though we aren't taking treasures from the disciples of those low-level dynasties, you have to be attentive to what the young master instructed. The person called Shang Ke instructed before his voice instantly vanished behind the city gate. Shang Ping, the owner of the cold, indifferent, and arrogant voice from before, wore plumed clothes and had a handsome appearance. Yet he had a pair of triangular eyes, causing his bearing to seem rather gloomy. After he obtained Shang Ke's instruction, a bright light flashed in his triangular eyes as he swept everyone outside the city gate and smirked. Everyone truly has good luck and have just happened to encounter the day my young master came upon successive happy events. So I won't be collecting treasures from all of you any longer. The expressions of everyone eased up greatly when they heard this, and some impatient people had already walked towards the city gate and quickly vanished behind it. When they saw those people entering the city safely and not being stopped by the disciples of the Shang clan on the way, everyone was instantly assured in their hearts, and they moved towards the city gate as well. Please halt for a moment. However, right when Chun Shi and the others were following behind Ling Zhe towards the city gate, they were stopped instead. Ling Zhe frowned and said with displeasure, "What? You want to stop me? Oh, so it's fellow Taoist Ling Zhe from the Dartang dynasty. You really are a rare guest. Your Dartang dynasty controls the southeast city gate. So why have you come over to the territory of my Shang clan?" Shang Ping glanced at Ling Zhe as his gaze focused slightly, and then he spoke casually. As he spoke, his gaze had already descended onto Chun Shi as he sized Chun Shi up imperceptibly, and a wisp excitement that was difficult to notice couldn't help but arise in the depths of his eyes. Even though this trace of excitement was concealed extremely deep within his eyes, it was still completely noticed by Chan Shi, and his heart couldn't help but sink. Could it be that these fellows have obtained some sort of instruction and intend to do harm to me? Humph. Do I, Ling Zhe, have to report where I go to you? Ling Zhe's eyes narrowed as he spoke coldly. If there isn't anything else, then please move aside. Shang Ping smiled completely indifferently, and then his gaze swept Huangfu Qingying, young Master Zhou, and the others as he said abruptly, "These few are probably the disciples of the Darchu dynasty, right?" Huangfu Qingying and the others were slightly stunned, and seemed to have never expected that this fellow they'd never met would suddenly recognize their identity. "Let's leave." Ling Zhe seemed to have realized something instead, and he signaled Huangfu Qingying and the others with his gaze before turning his head around and moving through the city gate. Everyone noticed the atmosphere was odd as well, and they followed closely behind Ling Zhe into the city right away. This kid has finally made an appearance. After he sent Chan Shi and the others off with his gaze and they vanished from within his field of vision, Shang Ping couldn't bear the excitement in his heart any longer and he cried out with delight. "He's Chan Shi," one of the people by his side asked with surprise. "Yeah, an extraordinary genius that has overcome the phoenix tribulation of rebirth. Unfortunately, he's probably unable to live past a few more days. Shang Ping sighed with emotion, and then he instructed, "Go, report this matter to the young master. The young master has been waiting for him for a very long time." Yes. Primeval City, an ancient city that stood towering since ancient times. This city that once possessed boundless glory was divided into 8 gates that lead directly towards all directions since the beginning when it was built. So it was also called the City of 8 Directions and took from the essence of the 8 trigrams that spoke about linking up the 8 directions to control the world. Within the city, the streets constructed from enormous rocks were wide and completely straight, and they were arranged in good order and led towards all directions. Tall pavilions with various styles stood all over the city, and even though they'd experienced the corrosion of countless years, the row after row of buildings still possessed their ancient auras from the primeval times. A vast and magnificent building stood towering at the northwest area of the city, and it was like a palace that was extremely striking. This place was the residence of the Shang clan disciples in Primeval City. At this moment, there was a green-robed and crimson-haired young man standing upright within the palace. His skin was white like jade, his appearance handsome, yet his eyes were actually suffused with a blue sheen and emitted a slightly evil aura. Presently, amongst the 8 city gates of Primeval City, the 3 top dynasties, the Dartang, Darkhan, and Darju dynasty each control one of the 8 city gates. Our Luo River Kingdom's Shang clan and the Shui and Feng clan each control 1 city gate as well. Besides that, the remaining 2 city gates are controlled by some of the other first-rate dynasties. Beside the green-robed and crimson-haired young man was a young man with a cold expression that stood there respectfully, and his voice was sharp as he said slowly, "According to my deduction, the members of those first-rate dynasties are nothing to fear during the final test. The only forces we must be on guard against are those 3 top dynasties and—" The green-robed and crimson-haired young man directly interrupted and said, "Shang Ke, how's the communication with the Shui and Feng clan? Have they agreed to form an alliance with my Shang clan to resist the threat those 3 top dynasties pose along with us?" This? Shang Ke hesitated slightly before answering. The Shui and Feng clan are still discussing it and haven't given an answer. Humph. What discussion? It's purely nonsense. They're obviously unwilling to form an alliance with our Shang clan, said the green-robed and crimson-haired young man with disdain. Forget it. After I seize the cultivation of those 2 young women, my strength will be able to attain the perfection stage of the rebirth realm. At that time, I'll already have no need for an alliance, and I'll directly swallow their forces up instead. How daring and resolute of you, young master. Shang Ke flattered hurriedly. The crimson-haired and green-robed young man smiled lightly, and then he frowned. But the only problem is Qing Shui and Jin Lu Qing are deeply in love. If I'm unable to kill the person their hearts belong to, I'll be unable to destroy the line of defense in their hearts and make them completely fall to become cultivation vessels for me. It's truly troublesome. Young master, are those 2 young women really so useful? Shang Ke asked carefully. Of course. When those 2 young women were mentioned, the crimson-haired and green-robed young man seemed to be extremely excited, and he said, "One of them is a reincarnated heavenly immortal that has grasped the profundity of light. The other the possessor of a primeval water-soul body that has grasped the profundities of darkness. They're simply like a pair of twins, and if I'm able to absorb both their cultivations completely, I'll be able to cultivate the Maiden Heaven Blessing technique and achieve the chaotic devil body. At that time, would anyone in the primeval battlefield be a match for me?" Chaotic devil body. Shang Ke's pupils constricted abruptly as he cried out involuntarily in surprise. Didn't this cultivation technique vanish long ago before the primordial era? How can it still exist in the world? It's simply a miracle. Ha ha ha! The green-robed and crimson-haired young man roared with laughter. A miracle? I, Shang Kuan, am a man that creates miracles. So what in the world am I unable to accomplish? The crimson-haired and green-robed Shang Kuan roared with laughter for a short moment before suddenly stopping, and then he frowned and said, Have any formidable figures appeared on the Martial Emperor's War Soul tablet lately? Xianxia was stunned, and then he shook his head and said, No, there hasn't been anyone capable of breaking through the top 50 positions. So in this way, that fellow Feng Jianbai is still occupying the position of first. Shang Kuan seemed to have heaved a sigh of relief, but his eyelids couldn't help but twitch when he mentioned the name Feng Jianbai. Xianxia nodded, and his expression was slightly heavy as an extremely proud and aloof figure couldn't help but appear in his mind. Feng Jianbai, a disciple of the Skycloud Kingdom's Feng clan, possessed a cultivation at the sixth tempering of the rebirth realm, and he was born with a pair of phantom eyes that were extremely terrifying and capable of seeing through a myriad of techniques. Once I successfully cultivate the chaotic devil body, then no matter how formidable his phantom eyes are, they would be useless against me. At that time, I only have to defeat him and I'll be the #1 figure in the primeval battlefield, and the emissaries of the Dark Reverie would surely pay special attention to me when they arrive. Shang Kuan grunted coldly as he spoke with a ghastly voice. Xianxia smiled and was just about to speak when his gaze shot towards the outside of the hall. Young master, Chun Shi has appeared. Right at this moment, a figure swiftly appeared outside the hall and spoke excitedly. What? Chun Shi? Shang Kuan swiftly turned around, and arcs of lightning exploded out from his eyes as they blinked. Good. Very good. He has really come to help me in a timely manner. Ha ha ha. Shang-Qing, what are you standing there for? Quickly report everything you know to the young master. Xianxia's face was suffused with a wisp of a smile as well, and he couldn't help but berate with a frown when he glanced over and saw that the person who came to report was standing there like an idiot. Shang-Qing hurriedly nodded and spoke about everything that had occurred outside the city gate. He's with the Dartang dynasty's Ling Zhe? Shang Kuan frowned. Young master, Ling Zhe's strength is formidable, and he's ranked the 24th on the Warsoul tablet. He's considered to be one of the pillars of support of the Dartang dynasty. Xianxia swiftly explained at the side. Could it be that he doesn't know that the northwest area of Primeval City is the territory of my Shang clan? He's really courting death. Shang Kuan laughed coldly as he waved his hand and instructed. People that have just arrived at Primeval City would surely head to the Warsoul tablet at the central area to measure their combat strength, and Chun Shi will surely be no exception. Xianxia, bring a few more people along and see exactly how formidable that kid Chun Shi's combat strength is. When he spoke up to hear, Shang Kuan's eyes were suffused with a dim blue glow, causing him to seem extremely calm and terrifying. That kid has overcome the Phoenix tribulation of rebirth. Even though he has just advanced to the rebirth realm, his strength and potential can't be underestimated. Carefully pay attention to him, and you must absolutely not allow any mishaps to occur. Don't worry, young master. Leave this matter to me. Xianxia smiled confidently, and then he asked, Young master, should we make a move and annihilate Chun Shi? Not for now. Presently, there are too many people in Primeval City that want to kill Chun Shi, and it's sufficient to let others do it for us. There's no need to make our own people take the risk. Shang Kuan's gaze was dim as he said, Perhaps others would look down on this kid because he's from an ordinary dynasty, but I won't. Conversely, in my opinion, this kid is extremely extraordinary, and he's a dangerous figure that must be dealt with carefully. So it's best to be slightly more careful. Xianxia was stunned as it was the first time he'd heard his young master have such a high evaluation of someone, and the trace of underestimation towards Chun Shi in his heart had vanished instantly without a trace. Go on. There are another 3 more months before the final test begins. I'm entirely capable of waiting for Chun Shi to be killed by the others before cultivating the chaotic devil body, and I won't take the risk personally. Shang Kuan held his hands behind his back and said indifferently, Of course, if his display is too inferior, then I'll capture him alive myself before killing him right before Qing Shui and Jin Lu Qing. Xianxia didn't speak any further, and he left after receiving his orders. He knew that the young master already had a plan in his heart. At this moment, he only had to act according to the will of his young master, and there would absolutely be no mistakes. Brother Chun, all of you must be careful. The disciples of the Shang clan seem to have noticed your existence since long ago, and you have to be on guard against them. They just walked out of the city when Ling Zhe frowned while sending a voice transmission because Shang Ping's attitude from before had caused him to faintly notice that something was off. Brother Ling, don't worry, I know. Chun Shi smiled lightly. Ling Zhe nodded and changed the topic. Let's go. Cultivators that have just arrived at Primeval City would surely head to the Martial Emperor's Warsoul tablet at the center of the city to measure their combat strength. Let's go over and take a look. The Martial Emperor's Warsoul tablet? Huang Fu Qingying and the others were shocked and seemed to have never imagined that such a treasure actually existed in Primeval City. Chun Shi wasn't one with shallow knowledge any longer, so he had a rather good understanding of the Warsoul tablet. Supposedly, there were 3 exalted emperors with extremely great fortune during the primordial era, and they were respectively the Equipment Emperor, Martial Emperor, and Spirit Emperor. The Equipment Emperor gathered chaotic divine stones from the absolute beginning of the world and spent a few thousands of years to refine 99,999 Tao measuring stones, and then he distributed it throughout the myriad of worlds to become the saint artifact that measured Tao insight in the 3 dimensions. This sort of stone was called the Equipment Emperor's Tao Measuring Stone. The Martial Emperor wandered the 3 dimensions and was moved by how cultivators in the world cultivated blindly, yet didn't know exactly how formidable their strengths were or how great their potentials were, causing them to go onto the wrong path in the end before perishing on the path to the Tao. So he utilized his supreme ability to split out a myriad of strands of his warsoul before sealing them within stone tablets that stood towering in the myriad of worlds in the universe. He did this all for the sake of allowing cultivators to sense the formidableness of their own strengths through the stone tablets and encourage them to cultivate, so as to avoid them being lost on the path to the Tao. This tablet was called the Martial Emperor's Warsoul Tablet, and it was extremely miraculous and capable of detecting the strength possessed by cultivators. The Spirit Emperor had compiled 2 rankings instead, the Martial Technique Gold rankings and Divine Ability Gold rankings of the 3 dimensions. These 2 rankings gathered all the Tao-grade martial techniques and divine abilities in the 3 dimensions before ranking them according to their might. The most miraculous part about these rankings was that every time another Tao-grade martial technique or divine ability appeared in the 3 dimensions, it would automatically appear in the rankings. Regretfully, those 2 rankings had vanished without a trace after the Spirit Emperor vanished. Supposedly, it was taken by the Immortal dimension, whereas some people say it was taken control of by some great power. In short, these 2 miraculous rankings hadn't appeared in the world for an extremely long time. These were the contributions of the 3 emperors to all the beings in the 3 dimensions. No matter if it was the Equipment Emperor's Tao Measuring Stone, the Martial Emperor's Warsoul Tablet, or the Martial Technique and Divine Ability Gold rankings of the 3 dimensions, all of them had brought extremely great benefits to all the myriad of beings in the 3 dimensions while establishing their reputation that would remain eternal. Thus, it could be said that the 3 emperors had done a great service to every being in the 3 dimensions. Chun Shi had once seen the Equipment Emperor's Tao Measuring Stone in Chen Yuan's treasure vault. At that time, he was extremely shocked by the Equipment Emperor's extravagance and great resolution. Now, when he heard that a saint artifact like the Martial Emperor's Warsoul Tablet actually existed within Primeval City, he was extremely shocked and curious in his heart. Let's go. The prerequisite to participating in the final test of the Primeval battlefield is to pass the test of the Warsoul Tablet. In other words, only by passing such a test would one possess the qualifications to participate in the final test. Ling Zhe smiled as he explained. 3 months from now, the emissaries of the Dark Reverie will arrive at Primeval City. At that time, they'll distribute command tokens of different grades according to everyone's rankings on the Warsoul Tablet. Oh, Chun, she said with surprise. There's such a thing? Then how are the grades of those command tokens differentiated? The command tokens are divided into the Heaven, Earth, Profound, and Yellow grades. Yellow was the most inferior, and Heaven was the most superior. According to my deduction based on experience from the past, those that are able to obtain a Heaven grade command token are basically those that are able to be ranked in the top 50 on the Warsoul Tablet. Ling Zhe smiled lightly as he said, "It's too troublesome to explain. In any case, all of you just have to understand that it's better the higher your ranking on the Warsoul Tablet is. Perhaps, you might even be directly taken a fancy upon by an extraordinary power of the dark reverie and be directly taken as a disciple. Xianxia and the others couldn't help but be moved when they heard this, and they looked forward to arriving before the Warsoul tablet even more. Immediately, all of them didn't hesitate in the slightest to move towards the center of the city. Presently, the rebirth realm experts of numerous dynasties had already converged in Primeval City. Moreover, the closer one got to the central area, the more rebirth realm experts one would see. Amidst these bustling streams of people, Xianxia even sensed some extremely formidable auras, and he couldn't help but be surprised in his heart. It really deserves to be called Primeval City. The cultivation of the experts that were capable of arriving here have already arrived at a rather high level. After the time for an incense stick to burn, Xianxia and the others had finally walked into the central area under Lingzai's lead. This was an extremely open square, whereas at the center of the square was a stone tablet that stood towering there. The stone tablet was 3 kilometers in height and seemed like a precipitous mountain. The stone tablet's entire body was suffused with a golden glow, while dense bright lights covered its surface before condensing into circle after circle of golden ripples that emitted a dazzling and resplendent brilliance that was striking to the extreme. At this moment, there were already numerous cultivators that had rushed over in the surroundings of the stone tablet while shadows flickered about. Some of them were measuring their own strengths. Some were observing the line after line of rankings that flickered with a golden sheen on the surface of the stone tablet. This is the Martial Emperor's Warsoul tablet? As he looked at the vast and brilliant stone tablet and felt the terrifying fluctuation emitted from it, Xianxia couldn't help but exclaim repeatedly with admiration. It was truly difficult for him to image exactly what sort of strength one had to attain to be able to refine such a miraculous saint artifact. Look, that's the Martial Emperor's Warsoul tablet. So long as you experience its measuring, your name will automatically appear on the tablet. At the same time, the stone tablet will also measure your strength and even potential before using it to determine your ranking. The higher one's ranking is, the more formidable one's strength and potential was. Lingzai pointed towards the enormous stone tablet in the distance as he smiled. It's even capable of measuring one's potential? Xianxia was shocked in his heart as he never imagined that the Warsoul tablet would actually be so miraculous. Of course, it's a saint artifact personally refined by the Martial Emperor, and its value is so great that it isn't inferior to an immortal artifact. Lingzai sighed emotionally with a light voice, and then he shook his head and said, "Let's go over as well and see exactly what sort of ranking everyone is able to obtain. If you're able to rank in the top 50, then you absolutely possess the qualifications to obtain a Dark Reverie token." The Martial Emperor's Warsoul tablet that was 3 kilometers in height like a precipitous mountain stood towering there silently, and it emitted a brilliant luster while ring after ring of terrifying fluctuations stretched out towards the surroundings and formed a strong pressure that pressed directly down onto the souls of everyone, causing everyone to feel awed by it. When Xianxia and the others arrived before the stone tablet, there were already numerous people surrounding it. There were over 1,000 dynasties in total that had entered the primeval battlefield this time, and even though only a small portion of these dynasties were capable of entering Primeval City, yet when all of them were added together they were still almost 1,000 in number. This didn't include the Rebirth Realm experts that hadn't rushed over yet. At this moment there were almost 100 cultivators around the Warsoul tablet, and they seemed to be few, yet when one truly saw these almost 100 Rebirth Realm experts around here in a dense mass, one would know exactly how magnificent this scene was. If I never walked out of the Darchu dynasty, it would be truly difficult for me to imagine that there are actually so many outstanding talents in the world, and all of them possess such extraordinary natural talent. It really is, as they say, there's always someone greater no matter how great one is. Young Master Zhou swept the surroundings with his gaze as he sighed with emotion. The others deeply agreed as well. It was indeed so. The higher one climbed and the further one traveled, the more one would feel that there was never a lack of outstanding people in this world. If one's views remained the same and became conceited, then one would simply be no different than a frog in a well that didn't know how vast the world was. Xianxia smiled and started sizing up everyone nearby the stone tablet. since they were able to overcome all the difficulties on the way in this extremely dangerous primeval battlefield to arrive here, practically all of them could be considered to be the top figures in the various dynasties. All their cultivations were at the rebirth realm, and most of them were at the first tempering of the rebirth realm. Moreover, there was no lack of cultivators at the second and third tempering of the rebirth realm, whereas cultivators at the fourth tempering of the rebirth realm were comparatively rare. As for cultivators that had attained the fifth tempering of the rebirth realm, they could only be described as existences that were like phoenix feathers and Qilin horns, and they could be counted with one's fingers. Xianxia's gaze that swept out suddenly focused slightly, as he'd sensed some extremely strong auras extremely close by to the War Soul tablet. The auras that drew his attention the most were two groups. At the eastern side was around 5 people with formidable auras and seemed to possess a cultivation at the fourth tempering of the rebirth realm. Especially the violet-robed young man at the center. His appearance was rather handsome. His expression icy cold and indifferent to the extreme, and he was obviously a proud person that thought extremely highly upon his own strength. But he did indeed have the qualifications to be arrogant. It could be discerned from the lively vital energy that circulated endlessly in his body that his cultivation had obviously attained the fifth tempering of the rebirth realm. Of course, it was only cultivation, and the formidableness of his combat strength was unknown. At the right of this group of people was another similar group of people, and every single one of them had auras that weren't inferior to the violet-robed young man. Moreover, the young woman at the center of this group was just like the violet-robed young man, and her cultivation was at the fifth tempering of the rebirth realm. It was even to the extent that in the presence of the young woman, the violet-robed young man seemed to have dimmed in comparison. The reason was extremely simple. The appearance of this young woman was too beautiful. She wore clothes that were white as snow while her black hair flowed down like a waterfall, and her slender waist drew out graceful and moving curves. Most striking of it all was that she was actually barefooted. Her toes were beautiful like white jade, and a fine red string was tied on her ankle. Her snow-white and crystalline skin, coupled with the fiery red and gorgeous string, her snow-white clothes, and black hair that were like a waterfall, it caused her to seem like an otherworldly celestial maiden. Many people faintly revealed a trace of burning desire when they looked at this young woman. But this white-clothed young woman seemed to be extremely calm when faced with these various gazes. Her clear and pitch-black eyes that were gems only stared at the surface of the stone tablet while blinking occasionally, and her eyes seemed extremely lively and carried a trace of an intelligent aura. When faced with a young woman that was extraordinarily unrestrained and possessed an indifferent disposition that carried a trace of liveliness, there was probably no one that could bear to hurt her. Amazing! Their entire forces are obviously superior to the first-rate dynasties like the Darqin and Darjin dynasty. Xianxia swept his gaze past these two powers and was lost in thought. Those are the disciples of the Huayin Kingdom's Shui clan, and the fellow in the lead is called Reincarnation. He possesses a cultivation at the fifth tempering of the rebirth realm. His disposition is extremely icy cold and merciless, and he's exceedingly arrogant. Just like the Shang clan's Shang Kuan, he's the leader of a prestigious clan from the ancient kingdoms. Ling Zhe introduced via voice transmission from the side. Oh, he's an expert indeed. Xianxia nodded. No matter how formidable Reincarnation was, it wasn't related to him, so there was no need for him to pay too much attention. That white-clothed young woman is called Su Qingyan, and she's the leading figure from the Darkhan dynasty. Her disposition is very good, so long as one doesn't offend her, then she normally would absolutely not take the initiative to look for trouble with another. Of course, if someone makes her their target, then that person would probably suffer misfortune. Ling Zhe smiled and continued explaining. Interesting. One side are disciples of a prestigious clan of the ancient kingdoms, whereas the other side are members of a top dynasty. I never encountered any great powers in the past, yet actually repeatedly encountered quite a few today. The primeval city really deserves to be the place experts gather. Xianxia was rather surprised as he spoke. A trace of interest couldn't help but arise in his heart because the two groups before him had extremely formidable strengths, and he wondered exactly what ranking they'd obtained on the War Soul tablet. Look quickly. Huangfu Changtian and Yu Xuanqin's names are on the stone tablet, and they're ranked the 69th and 73rd respectively. Looks like they have really already arrived at Primeval City. Right at this moment, young Master Zhou suddenly cried out in surprise. Xianxia was stunned, and then he shot his gaze towards the Warsoul tablet. A few hundreds of names were lined up densely atop the tablet, and the lower one was ranked. The lower it indicated one's strength to be, whereas the opposite could be said for those ranked higher. Moreover, Huangfu Changtian and Yu Xuanqin's names had really appeared in the top 100 ranks, and this caused Xianxia to instantly understand that not only had these two people advanced into the rebirth realm, they might have obtained other fortuitous encounters in the primeval battlefield, allowing them to be ranked in the top 100. As his gaze continued to move up, Xianxia's eyes quickly squinted and revealed a trace of delight, because it was shockingly Fan Yunlan's name that was ranked at the 32nd position. This also meant that she'd already arrived at Primeval City safely. If one were to count carefully, then besides Lu Xiao, who was killed by Huangfu Changtian, the other members of the Darchu dynasty that had entered the primeval battlefield had already arrived at Primeval City. If this matter were to be spread out, then the Darchu dynasty, who was a member of the ordinary dynasties, could feel proud. After all, it was already considered to be fortunate if 2 or 3 disciples of an ordinary dynasty were capable of arriving at Primeval City. I wonder where Miss Fan is now. I hope she hasn't been deceived by that black sheep. Huangfu Changtian. Xianxia shook his head and knew that it was entirely useless to think too much about it now. How terrifying! The top 30 positions have actually all been occupied by the disciples of the 3 top dynasties and prestigious clans. Huangfu Qingying was looking at the rankings on the stone tablet as well, and she let out an exclamation of admiration. Xianxia raised his eyes to look over, and he only saw Ling Zai's name at the 24th position, whereas he didn't recognize any other names. No, there were still some names that he'd recognized. For example, Shang Ping, who he'd encountered before the city gate, was ranked at the 29th position, and Shang Ke, who he'd heard the voice of, yet didn't see his face, was ranked at the 22nd position, only 2 positions higher than Ling Zai. Besides that, he saw Shang Kuan's name in the top 5 positions. This person was ranked 4th, and exactly how formidable Shang Kuan's strength was could be perceived from this. Xianxia frowned before his expression returned to calm. No matter how strong Shang Kuan was, it was unable to change his resolution to rescue Qing Shui and Jin Luqing, and even if he fought Shang Kuan, he wasn't afraid in the slightest. Even though his cultivation was only at the first tempering of the rebirth realm now, Xianxia also possessed his body refinement cultivation, so he was entirely unafraid of any opponent. Feng Jianbai, Li Xiaoyun, Su Luo. After he intentionally paid attention to the top 3 names, Xianxia moved his gaze away and started sizing up the cultivators that were measuring their strengths at this moment. He noticed that every time a cultivator finished the measuring, the cultivator's name would appear on the Warsoul tablet. But these names were mostly at the lower rankings, and there were very few that ranked highly. Right at this moment, Xianxia suddenly noticed that Xianxia had already walked to arrive before the Warsoul tablet, and he intended to measure his strength. As the leading figure in the Xue clan, Xianxia instantly drew the gazes of most people as soon as he appeared. After all, practically all the figures that were on par with Xianxia were ranked in the top 10. At this moment, as soon as he appeared, everyone was already sure that his ranking would surely be able to easily charge into the top 20, and they weren't so certain if he would be able to be ranked in the top 10. But this was precisely the thing everyone looked forward to the most. After all, the top 10 names on the stone tablet hadn't undergone any changes for an extremely long time already. Would Xianxia's appearance be able to change this fixed situation? Under the gazes of everyone present, Xianxia's expression was icy cold as before as he directly arrived before the Warsoul tablet, and then he stretched out his right hand to lightly place it onto the surface of the stone table that was suffused with gold light. Right when his palm touched the surface of the stone tablet, a vast and brilliant golden light swiftly shot out and enveloped his figure within it, causing him to seem like a golden war god. At the instant the golden light appeared, a dazzling glow gushed out into appearance on the Warsoul tablet along with it, and it rose violently all the way from the bottom of the stone tablet. In the blink of an eye, it had already charged into the top 100. Moreover, its momentum didn't slow down in the slightly. The top 50, Top 30, Top 20. When the dazzling glow arrived at the top 15, numerous exclaims of shock resounded out instantly at the scene. When the dazzling glow charged up to here, its swiftly rising momentum showed signs of slowing down. Yet after the time of a few breaths, it had already charged into the 11th position. Most people couldn't help but clench their fists tightly when they saw this scene, and they stared at the surface of the stone tablet without blinking and with concentration as they were deeply afraid of missing the slightest detail. Xianxia's mood was rather calm. He'd already discerned that if nothing unexpected happened, then Xianxia would absolutely be able to charge into the top 10. Moreover, he had an extremely great chance to charge into the top 5. Sure enough, the following scene confirmed that Xianxia's deduction wasn't wrong. The dazzling glow stopped not long after. The 5th. He actually changed the fixed situation for real. After the scene experienced a short period of silence, a wave of exclamations resounded abruptly. As they looked at Xianxia's name that finally stopped at the 5th position on the Martial Emperor's Warsoul tablet, everyone present couldn't help but exclaim with admiration. Such strength to be ranked in the top 5 was sufficient to draw the attention of the emissaries of the Dark Reverie. But Xianxia seemed to not be satisfied, and he frowned before turning around and withdrawing while a trace of gloominess flashed in the space between his brows. He originally thought he would be able to be ranked in the top 4, or at least push Xianxia down in the rankings. Unfortunately, he was still a step away in the end. "I'll try as well." Right when everyone exclaimed in admiration at Xianxia's ranking, a clear and melodious voice resounded out as Su Qingyan, who wore white clothes, walked gracefully, while her clothes fluttered as she arrived trippingly before the Warsoul tablet. "Miss Su, you think you have the ability to surpass me?" Xianxia, who'd withdrawn to the side, was stunned. And then he looked at Su Qingyan's graceful, slender, and beautiful figure and couldn't help but ask extremely coldly, "I'll know after I try." Su Qingyan's clear eyes spun as she blinked them and smiled lightly, and she completely disregarded the mocking intention in Xianxia's words as she stretched out her snow-white and delicate hand to lightly press onto the stone tablet. "Humph!" Xianxia puckered his lips and seemed to be rather indifferent, but his eyes stared fixedly at the stone tablet. Obviously, he was actually slightly worried in his heart that Su Qingyan would surpass him. At the moment Su Qingyan's white hand had just touched the surface of the stone tablet, a resplendent golden light similarly gushed out and enveloped her slender and graceful figure, and then a dazzling light swiftly rose from the bottom of the stone tablet. Under the shocked gazes of everyone present, this dazzling light moved like a hot knife cutting through butter and charged up repeatedly to surpass numerous names. In the end, it stopped at the 4th position, and it pushed the Shang clan's Xianxia down a position. In this way, Xianxia's ranking fell along with this, and he was pushed out of the top 5 to become the 6th. "Young Master Xue, it was a good competition." Su Qingyan grinned as she turned around and nodded to Xianxia. Xianxia's icy cold expression instantly became extremely gloomy. Originally, his inability to surpass Xianxia had already caused him to feel unhappy, as if a needle was stuck in his heart. Now, being pushed out from the top 5 by Su Qingyan caused him to be depressed to the point of wishing for nothing more than to turn around and leave. Dark Han Dynasty's Su Qingyan is extremely extraordinary. Xianxia sighed with emotion in his heart, and this aroused his interest towards the Warsoul tablet even more. Su Qingyan's measurement drew a wave of exclaims of admiration once more. This beautiful and lively white-clothed young woman was capable of being considered to be a top figure amongst the Rebirth Realm experts because she was capable of obtaining such dazzling achievements while amongst the numerous experts in the primeval city. Meanwhile, besides having burning gazes as they looked at Su Qingyan, many people had a trace of envy and reverence contained within their gazes. Before they came to the primeval battlefield, they were famous figures in the younger generation of their various dynasties. Yet after they entered the primeval battlefield, they suddenly noticed that even geniuses are divided into different ranks. Some people gradually became mediocre, cast into a shade, and even died. Some revealed their extraordinary ability, became even stronger, and were extremely dazzling. All of this caused all the outstanding talents from the various dynasties to clearly understand a principle: there was always a higher mountain. This principle seemed shallow and easy to understand, yet it was the easiest to overlook. Brother Chen, all of you should go measure your strengths as well. I'm really looking forward to a miracle that draws the attention of everyone to appear amongst all of you. Ling Zhe suddenly turned around and smiled to Chen Shi and the others. All of them were from ordinary dynasties, so they naturally weren't so attention-drawing like Xianxia and Su Qingyan, and even if people noticed them, they merely took them to be a group of ordinary people. This fellow is rather impatient. With his cultivation at the initial stage of the rebirth realm, he'll probably be ranked at a position of over a few hundred. Huang Fu Qingying chuckled as she teased. I'm truly worried he goes with great hopes, but comes back disappointed and be thoroughly destroyed from the blow it strikes upon him. Everyone couldn't help but burst into laughter. All of them understood young Master Zhou's disposition that was carefree, open, and disregarding of conduct. If he was really ranked at the bottom, they really wondered what sort of expression he would have. Of course, all of them were joking, and it was teasing between friends that was harmless. I think Brother Zhou's strength is very formidable, and he'll surely not be at the bottom. The nearby Ling Yu scratched his head while he grinned. From which dynasty did he come from to actually be able to charge into the top 50? Right at this moment, the group of people in the side were in an uproar. Chen Shi and the others were stunned, and they were dumbstruck when they raised their eyes to look over. The glow on the Warsoul tablet that represented young Master Zhou's rankings was flickering repeatedly as it rose, and it actually swiftly charged into the top 50 rankings. Moreover, its momentum didn't reduce in the slightest as it continued charging up. Could it be that this fellow is an expert that concealed his strength all along as well? Huang Fu Qingying spoke with an astonished tone. She was only teasing young Master Zhou at the beginning, and she believed his strength wouldn't be ranked at the bottom as well. Yet never had she imagined that not only was this fellow not ranked at the bottom, he'd actually charged into the top 50. How could she not be astonished? Big brother, Brother Zhou's ranking has surpassed you. Ha ha ha. What did I say? Brother Zhou's strength and potential is very good. Ling Yu laughed happily at the side. However, Chen Shi and the others were unable to laugh because their minds were firmly drawn by the stone table that kept changing. Just like Ling Yu had said, young Master Zhou's rankings had completely surpassed Ling Zhe and charged into the top 20, and it finally stopped at the 16th position. Even though such a ranking was far inferior to Xianxia and Su Qingyan, young Master Zhou's cultivation was only at the first tempering of the rebirth realm, and it was sufficiently shocking for him to be able to charge into the top 20 with such a strength. Young Master Zhou couldn't help but be stunned when he saw his ranking, and he scratched his head while he said with a dazed expression, "What the hell? I was worried I wouldn't be able to be ranked in the top 100 earlier. Stop putting on a show." Huang Fu Qingying couldn't help but roll her eyes at young Master Zhou. Young Master Zhou chuckled with a silly expression that actually felt slightly like Ling Yu's. All of them over here were chatting casually, whereas the nearby crowd of people were in an uproar because of the ranking obtained by young Master Zhou. After all, the top 30 rankings on the Warsoul tablet had long since been occupied by the disciples of the prestigious clans and top dynasties. Now, a dark horse had actually charged its way out to be ranked at the 16th position, so young Master Zhou instantly became the center of attention. Unfortunately, practically no one was capable of recognizing who young Master Zhou was. After all, there were truly too few disciples from ordinary dynasties that had entered Primeval City, and the people present had come from other dynasties, so it was naturally impossible for them to recognize young Master Zhou. I never imagined that I just spoke about miracles and Brother Zhou already put on such a wonderful show. I have no choice but to feel admiration towards you. Ling Zhe sized young Master Zhou up once more before he grinned. She was already so heaven-defying. So Ling Zhe never imagined in the past that a random person from Xi's side would actually possess such an extraordinary strength, and he had no choice but to sigh with admiration. But he was able to vaguely infer that besides strength, the reason young Master Zhou was able to be ranked so highly was mostly because of his potential. After all, besides strength, one's potential occupied an important portion in the factors that affected one's ranking on the Warsoul tablet. In other words, young Master Zhou's potential was enormous to a shocking degree, and this was why he was able to forcefully charge into the top 20 and have the honor to ascend the 16th position. After he thought through all this, Ling Zhe calmed down slightly in his heart. Truthfully speaking, he was slightly disgruntled in his heart when his ranking was surpassed by young Master Zhou. However, the following scenes that occurred almost shocked Ling Zhe's jaws off, and he didn't even have the thought to feel disgruntled. The reason was extremely simple. After young Master Zhou was measured, Huangfu Qingying, Zhao Qinghe, and Ling Yu had successively underwent their measurement, and all of their rankings on the Warsoul tablet had actually charged into the top 20. Huangfu Qingying was the 17th, Zhao Qinghe the 18th, and Ling Yu was even more terrifying. He directly charged into the 11th, forcefully pushing down young Master Zhou and the others by one ranking. This string of changes that occurred didn't just cause Ling Zhe to be shocked speechless. Even the nearby cultivators couldn't help but let out waves of exclamations from their shock. Huangfu Qingying. My God! Could it be that they're from the Darchu dynasty? What? These 4 people are all from the Darchu dynasty. How can this be possible? It's only an ordinary dynasty, so it can already be considered to be extremely fortunate that they were able to arrive at Primeval City. How could so many appear suddenly and be ranked in the top 20? It's true. Even though ordinary dynasties aren't worthy to be taken seriously, Huangfu Qingying is the daughter of the Darchu dynasty's emperor. According to the information I possess, they're surely disciples of the Darchu dynasty. My God! A single Chun Shi being from the Darchu dynasty has already caused it to be sufficiently abnormal. Now, even the other disciples of the Darchu dynasty are so formidable. What the fuck? Wait, you said Chun Shi? Then, that person wouldn't be Chun Shi, right? As they looked at Huangfu Qingying and the others, everyone present couldn't bear the shock in their hearts and started discussing in low voices. And then, an exclamation of shock resounded out abruptly and instantly converged the gazes of everyone onto Chun Shi. After they sized him up and compared him with the information they possessed from before, everyone was even surer that this person was undoubtedly Chun Shi. When they thought of how this fellow had fought numerous experts by himself and crushed a heavenly immortal's decree on the Isle of Fallen Treasures, and he'd even overcome the Phoenix tribulation of rebirth that had only appeared at the time of the absolute beginning of the world, everyone couldn't help but feel dazed and shocked in their hearts. This fellow is Chun Shi? Meanwhile, the groups of Shui Ranqin and Su Qingyan that were originally intending to leave stopped their footsteps in unison, and they looked at the distant Chun Shi with a surprised gaze. Obviously, they'd heard of the numerous deeds related to Chun Shi. Chun Shi seemed to be rather calm when faced with the converged gazes of everyone, because he'd known long ago that it was surely impossible to continue concealing his identity. The reason was extremely simple. So long as his strength was measured by the Warsoul tablet, his name would appear on the stone tablet, and it was impossible for it not to be noticed by others. So even if he was looked at by numerous gazes, it wouldn't affect his mood in the slightest. In the next moment, he'd already moved to arrive before the stone tablet, and then he raised his hand to press it onto the stone tablet. Humph! This fellow's reputation is rather great. Huh. The greater his reputation, the faster he'll die. This fellow has offended so many dynasties, yet actually still dares to appear before the martial emperor's Warsoul tablet without the slightest care. He isn't even afraid of being chopped to death by others. I'm very curious if this fellow is really as formidable as the rumors say. There were a few people discussing in low voices far away from the Warsoul tablet, and the person in the lead was precisely Sean Quebec. When he saw everyone by his side revealing disdain towards Chun Shi, Sean K couldn't help but shake his head lightly. Truthfully speaking, he didn't take Chun Shi seriously in his heart. Chun Shi was only a little fellow from an ordinary dynasty. Even if Chun Shi had overcome the legendary Phoenix tribulation of rebirth and possessed the potential to become an exalted figure, so what? Potential was only potential in the end, and it wasn't strength. If Chun Shi's cultivation had already attained the 5th tempering of the rebirth realm, then perhaps Sean K would see Chun Shi in a new light. But, obviously, Chun Shi was currently at the initial stage of the rebirth realm now, and such a cultivation was extremely common in Primeval City and was utterly not worth mentioning. But when he recalled the young master's instructions from before, Sean K instantly woke up from his pondering, and he turned around and said coldly, "Everyone, we've come to watch and not to kill. If anyone dares act rashly and spoils the important matters of the young master, then I probably don't need to tell all of you what the consequences are, right? The hearts of everyone went cold when they heard this, and those Shang clan disciples that originally intended to make a move against Chun, she had abandoned these thoughts right away. They didn't ask why for a simple reason, because this was something instructed by the young master Shang Kuan. They had to carry it out unconditionally, and they didn't dare go against it in the slightest. That fellow has started the measurement. Let me see exactly what rank his strength can attain. Shang Kei's gaze swept over and instantly saw Chun. She had already walked towards the War Soul tablet, causing him to be unable to help but speak out curiously. Under the gazes of everyone present, Chun Shi arrived before the War Soul tablet before stretching out his palm and lightly placing it on the icy cold surface of the tablet. That's... What a familiar figure. It seems to be Yu Xianxia. Right when Chun Shi's palm had just touched the surface of the tablet, and he hadn't had the chance to feel the changes that occurred on the stone tablet, a thin figure flashed before an extremely far-away street from the corner of his field of vision, and it was like a brief glimpse of lightning that instantly vanished without a trace. Wait, the young princess, the others, and I are all here and we're so conspicuous. But he acted as if he didn't see us and left hastily. Could it be that something has happened? Chun Shi frowned. Yu Xianxia was a sedate and restrained person that kept an extremely low profile. Even if it was when they were at the Darchu dynasty, his relationship with the others was ordinary. So, if it was at any other time, Chun Shi would utterly not pay too much attention to this person. But it was different now. The black sheep, Huangfu Changtian, had already arrived at Primeval City, and it would be extremely bad if Huangfu Changtian deceived and caused harm to Yu Xianxia. In the next instantly, a vast golden light enveloped down from the stone tablet, causing Chun Shi to be jolted awake from his contemplation. And only now did he notice that his measurement had already began. Swoosh! Vast and gorgeous golden light surged on the War Soul tablet. Under the numerous shocked gazes of everyone, the dazzling glow shot out explosively along the surface of the tablet, and it started to rise madly at a shocking speed. Not only did the dazzling glow that rose violently draw the gazes of everyone present at the scene, even the cultivators that were passing by on the nearby streets stopped successively before looking at the surface of the War Soul tablet with astonishment. In merely an instant, the glow had moved like a hot knife cutting through butter and directly charged into the top 10. It's actually at the 10th already. How fast? A wave of commotion erupted in the surroundings of the War Soul tablet. The gazes of everyone shot in unison towards the new 10th ranking, and their gazes carried shock that couldn't be concealed because a figure that charged directly into the top 10 hadn't appeared for a very long time. Comparatively speaking, Huangfu Qingying and the others seemed to be much more composed because they knew since long ago that with Chun Shi's strength, he would surely be able to be ranked in the top 10, and it was only a matter of time. But, when they saw Chun Shi's name charge into the top 10 in an instant, they still felt slightly dizzy. Isn't this speed of charging up a little bit too ferocious? It's a bit too early to be excited now. Bai Lingyun looked at the tall figure by the side of the stone tablet with a complicated expression. As the only existence amongst everyone who'd fought Chun Shi before, she knew extremely clearly about the strength Chun Shi possessed, and she knew that this fellow would absolutely not stop at the 10th. Ling Zhe couldn't help but laugh bitterly when he heard this, and he even doubted if this fellow really came from an ordinary dynasty. This strength, it's simply even more formidable than most of the experts in those top dynasties. He has risen to the 7th. Right when Bai Lingyun finished speaking, a wave of exclamations exploded out once more from the surroundings. The glow on the War Soul tablet that represented Chun Shi's name had already easily surpassed the person that was in the 7th ranking before this. When he saw this scene, Xianxia's expression couldn't help but reveal shock, and the muscles in his entire body involuntarily tightened. His ranking had already fallen to the 6th after he was surpassed by Su Qingyan earlier. At this moment, when he saw Chun Shi's ranking had actually charged into the 7th just like this and was about to surpass him, how could he retain his composure? However, no matter how unwilling he was, Chun Shi's ranking still moved with a momentum that didn't slow down in the slightest as it directly pushed his name down. At this moment, Xianxia simply suspected that the War Soul tablet was broken, Being unable to surpass Shangkuan had already caused Reincarnation to be dissatisfied, and being surpassed by Su Qingyan later on even caused him to be extremely unhappy. Now, a little fellow from an ordinary dynasty had actually surpassed him. All of this caused Reincarnation to be aggrieved to the point of almost spitting blood, and his icy cold face had become extremely gloomy. But no matter how unsightly Reincarnation's expression was, the rising momentum of that glow didn't disperse, and under the shocked gazes of everyone, after it pushed his name down, it rose once more and pushed Shangkuan's name down as well. How can this be possible? At this moment, the relaxed expressions of Xianxia and the group of disciples from the Shang clan had already vanished, and replacing it was a heavy expression, a matchlessly heavy expression. Earlier, they thought it could be considered to be not bad if Xianxia was able to be ranked in the top 30. Never had they imagined that this fellow would charge into the top 10 in an instant, and the strong contrast was simply like a slap that struck heavily on their faces, causing them to feel burning pain. But this wasn't important. What was important was that after the glow that represented Xianxia's ranking had surpassed Reincarnation, it still didn't show any sign of stopping, and it directly pushed down their young master with a speed that was neither fast nor slow. When they saw this scene, they almost didn't dare believe their eyes. A dignified disciple of a prestigious clan of an ancient kingdom, the leading figure in the younger generation of the Shang clan, had actually been pushed down in the rankings by a fellow from an ordinary dynasty? Who would believe it if news of this was spread? Looks like another formidable figure has appeared in this primeval city. Su Qingyan's eyes squinted before she blinked her eyes, and then she seemed to be lost in thought as she looked at Xianxia's tall figure that was enveloped by the golden light. At this moment, Xianxia had already ranked into the 5th position, whereas the 4th position was precisely Su Qingyan's. Someone couldn't bear the astonishment in his heart, and he muttered, "This fellow clearly possesses a cultivation that's merely at the first tempering of the rebirth realm. So how could he be so formidable? He's about to surpass Su Qingyan." Unknowingly, there were more and more people that had rushed over after hearing of the news in the surroundings of the Warsoul tablet, and then they looked at the glow that was still rising slowly with shocked expressions. The glow was gradually approaching the 4th position. The clamorous atmosphere had actually become much quieter without anyone noticing. The numerous gazes stared with concentration at the glow that charged up with a speed that was neither slow nor fast, and they practically forgot to breathe. Most of them had heard of Xianxia's reputation. They knew that he'd given risen to a rain of blood while fighting numerous experts alone on the Isle of Fallen Treasures and shocked the entire primeval battlefield. But it was only a rumor in the end. In their hearts, it was truly very difficult for them to compare Xianxia with those disciples that came from the 3 top dynasties and prestigious clans. After all, even if Xianxia had overcome the Phoenix tribulation of rebirth, his cultivation was only at the first tempering of the rebirth realm, and he was from an ordinary dynasty like the Darchu dynasty. No matter if it was cultivation, resources, or reserves, he was inferior. However, now, as they looked at the scene that occurred before their eyes, the perceptions ingrained in their hearts were instantly obliterated, and they didn't dare underestimate Xianxia in the slightest any longer. "It has surpassed the 4th. Suddenly, a hoarse exclamation resounded out, and the people present couldn't help but smack their lips. They'd noticed as well that the glow that rose at a speed that was neither slow nor fast had actually surpassed Su Qingyan, who was ranked the 4th, and replaced her. "My God! It isn't over." Right when everyone was shocked to the point their scalps went numb, the glow still hadn't stopped, and it instantly caused some people to be unable to help but groan. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings of the Warsoul tablet froze slightly. Obviously, they'd entirely never imagined that Xianxia, who was from the Darchu dynasty, would actually put on such a shocking display. At this moment, it wasn't just Reincarnation, Su Qingyan, or Xianxia's group in the distance. Even Huangfu Qingying and the others who were Xianxia's companions that were extremely familiar with him were shocked to the point of almost becoming numb to it. Those 3 names ranked in the top 3 had always been maintained firmly at the top without moving since the day Primeval City was opened, and no matter how many people charged towards those rankings, no one had shaken them, let alone surpassed them. However, now, the glow that represented Xianxia was rising at a slow speed with the intention of charging into the top 3. If he really were to succeed, then Everyone held their breaths as they stared fixedly at the surface of the stone tablet without blinking. They knew that so long as Xianxia advanced a step further, then the meaning this represented would be completely different. Feng Jianbai, Li Xiaoyun, Su Luo. Names that looked to be simple, yet represented three overlords in Primeval City. Since Primeval City was opened up to this very moment, more than half a year had already passed. Yet these three names were unable to be moved by anyone up until now. This wasn't just a symbol of honor. It was the best display of their formidable strength. Yet now, there was a dark horse from an ordinary dynasty that had charged out to repeatedly break through and arrive at the 4th rank. But not only did this dark horse not stop moving, the dark horse had strength remaining instead, continuing to rise slowly with the intention of shaking the thrones of the top 3. All of this caused everyone present to be excited, nervous, perturbed, and expectant. They knew very clearly how enormous an uproar would be created in this city if Xianxia advanced a step further. At this moment, many people couldn't help but clench their fists while they felt the blood within their bodies was on the verge of boiling, and they felt extreme anticipation. Interesting, looks like this Xianxia is really as the rumors say, and he possesses boundless potential after overcoming the Phoenix tribulation of rebirth. Otherwise, he would surely be unable to achieve such dazzling accomplishments by relying solely on his current strength. Two figures had suddenly appeared on the top of a tower extremely far away from the Warsoul tablet, and the one that spoke was a handsome young man in apricot yellow Taoist robes, brows that slanted upwards and brilliant eyes. If others were here, they would surely be able to recognize that this person was the leading figure of one of the 3 top dynasties, the Darja dynasty's Su Luo. Potential? I don't think so. The person by Su Luo's side shook his head. He wore simple pale blue-colored clothes that were thin and large. His hair was casually tied into a bun, but his entire body was extremely clean and carried a valiant feeling. He was like a soul cloud between the peaks of a mountain, a pine tree on the precipice, and he seemed very poised and dignified. In terms of bearing, he wasn't the slightest bit inferior to Su Luo who was by his side. This person was Li Xiaoyun, a dazzling genius from the Dartang dynasty. Oh! Su Luo's brows raised as he glanced at Li Xiaoyun and asked, "Then according to you, this kid relied on his cultivation at the initial stage of the rebirth realm to charge into the 4th position? No one can charge into the top 5 solely by relying on strength and not be surpassed by others. You and I are the same." Li Xiaoyun smiled, and then he continued. "When I found out this kid destroyed a heavenly immortal's decree, I started paying attention to him, and then I gathered all the information related to him. Only after this did I notice that it turned out there were true geniuses even in ordinary dynasties." True geniuses? Su Luo repeated it once more. He knew that a person who could be called a genius by a figure like Li Xiaoyun could be counted with the fingers on his hands. So, since Xianxia was actually capable of obtaining such an evaluation, Su Luo couldn't help but feel surprised, and he couldn't restrain himself from asking, "Is he really so formidable? Oh you, when can you stop placing your gaze only amongst our top dynasties? After all, a golden phoenix can even fly out of a nest in a gorge." Li Xiaoyun smiled as he teased, and then he restrained his smile and stared at the tall figure in the distance as he said seriously, "It's too complicated to speak about this kid's experiences. You only have to remember that this kid's ability is entirely not inferior to Feng Jianbai." Feng Jianbai. No matter how composed Su Luo was, his eyes couldn't help but narrow slightly as an imperceptible trace of fear flashed past his eyes when he heard this name being mentioned. However, more shocking to him was Li Xiaoyun actually compared Xianxia to Feng Jianbai, and this simply caused him to be slightly unable to believe his ears. Feng Jianbai, a disciple of the Skycloud Kingdom's Feng clan. He possessed a cultivation at the 6th tempering of the rebirth realm, and was born with a pair of phantom eyes that were capable of seeing through a myriad of techniques and anticipating the moves of his enemy. Unless one's strength firmly surpassed his, otherwise one would surely be easily defeated by him in battle, and he was an absolutely terrifying figure. Xianxia's ability is actually entirely not inferior to Feng Jianbai? Doesn't that mean even I and Li Xiaoyun might not be a match for Xianxia? Look, he has already surpassed your ranking. Right at this moment, the nearby Li Xiaoyun suddenly pointed towards the distant Warsoul tablet while speaking with a calm expression. Su Luo was shocked and instantly returned to his senses from his chaotic thoughts before shooting his gaze towards the distance. And then his eyes squinted as his expression finally changed slightly. He has surpassed the third. My God! This is actually really happening. The atmosphere before the Warsoul tablet that was originally silent was suddenly broken because everyone couldn't refrain from letting out numerous exclamations of shock as they stared at the new name that had charged onto the third ranking on the surface of the stone tablet, and their faces were covered in astonishment that couldn't be concealed. The overlord expert from the Darju dynasty, Su Luo, who no one was capable of shaking for a long time, has actually been forcefully pushed down from the third ranking by Qian Shi. Everyone looked at this scene with disbelief. Obviously, they were utterly unable to imagine how a young man from an ordinary dynasty was actually capable of changing the fixed rankings and ascending into the top 3. In the past, such an incident would have surely not occurred. Swoosh! Swoosh! However, before everyone could recover from their shock, Qian Shi's name on the Warsoul tablet suddenly erupted with a ball of extremely dazzling golden light, and in merely an instant, it surpassed the second-ranked Li Xiaoyun and even directly pushed down Feng Jianbai, who was ranked first. Everything happened too quickly, and the speed his name charged up at was countless times quicker than before. So when everyone raised their gazes up once more, Qian Shi's name had shockingly already ascended to first place. The atmosphere at the scene instantly became deathly and perfectly silent when everyone saw this scene, and the expressions of everyone stiffened as their consciousness were numbed. Only their practically suffocated breathing started to become rapid. First place. Qian Shi. After an unknown period of time, a hoarse voice suddenly broke the silence, causing the hearts of everyone to be unable to refrain from constricting fiercely, and then the entire scene seethed with excitement. A miracle! This is absolutely a miracle! Even Li Xiaoyun and Feng Jianbai were unable to stop Qian Shi's footsteps. Is this fellow really an initial stage rebirth realm cultivator? What ability does the Darchu dynasty possess to actually have such an outstanding genius? It's truly a cause for envy. Clamorous waves of voices filled every single inch of space and shook the surroundings. After they witnessed Qian Shi ascend to the first ranking with their own 2 eyes, every single cultivator present revealed a shocked and excited expression. They knew that the history of Primeval City would probably be changing. The first ranking wasn't something that only the disciple of the prestigious clans and top dynasties were capable of occupying, and experts of ordinary dynasties were similarly capable. Xianxia's icy-cold face was covered in shock and a sense of loss. The words Qian Shi pressed onto him to the point he was unable to catch his breath. If Qian Shi had only charged into the 4th ranking, then even though he would feel fearful, he wouldn't be like he was now. But unfortunately, Qian Shi's final results wasn't 4th place, but the first. Xianxia wasn't stupid, and he knew extremely well what this ranking represented. So besides feeling a sense of loss in his heart, he didn't feel aggrieved. After all, even Feng Jianbai, Li Xiaoyun, and Su Luo, the 3 overlord figures, were surpassed by Qian Shi. So he didn't have anything to be disgruntled about. I never expected this. I truly never expected this. Su Qingyan's clear eyes glowed as she stared at the tall figure, and her gaze glowed with extraordinary splendor. It wasn't that she was attracted by Qian Shi, but merely her dense curiosity towards the strength Qian Shi revealed. Go. Report every single detail about what happened here to the young master. Xianxia took a deep breath and forcefully restrained the shock in his heart as he turned around and instructed. Yes. Meanwhile, these disciples of the Shang clan completely gave up their thoughts to compete with Qian Shi, and they received their orders without the slightest hesitation upon hearing it. Looks like the young master's predictions were really correct. This fellow Qian Shi really isn't someone ordinary people can compare to. Xianxia rubbed his slightly stiff face as he felt fortunate in his heart that he didn't make a move rashly earlier. Let's go. Li Xiaoyun suddenly glanced deeply at the distant Qian Shi, and then he turned around decisively and without the slightest hesitation. We're leaving just like this? Su Luo shook his head and worked hard to make himself seem calmer, and he couldn't help but ask in surprise when he saw Li Xiaoyun leaving decisively. Then what are you staying back for? Could it be that you want to make friends with Xianxia? Li Xiaoyun seemed to be extremely carefree as he said, "Don't place too much importance on ranking, as it's only for the eyes of the emissaries of the dark reverie. To us, only true battle is capable of determining if someone is truly formidable. Even though the Warsoul tablet is extremely formidable, it's merely to a certain extent. After all, strength and battle are two completely different things. Right? Brother Li is correct. It was I that was adhering slightly too strictly to such formalities and fell into the grasps of my inner demons." Su Luo pondered deeply for a moment before nodding to himself, and then he followed behind Li Xiaoyun and left swiftly. "Xianxia, congratulations. Nice, you really created a miracle. And it's even an unbelievable miracle. First place. Xianxia, don't be so abnormal in the future, alright? Otherwise, the pressure we face when following by your side is extremely great." Meanwhile, Huangfu Qingying, Ling Zhe, young Master Zhou, and the others walked over successively, and they grinned as they congratulated Xianxia, who walked over from before the stone tablet. Everyone present was instantly shocked once more when they saw this scene, as only now had they realized that Huangfu Qingying and the others were just like Xianxia, and all of them came from the same dynasty, the Darchu dynasty. As an ordinary dynasty, it possessed 5 members that had ranked into the top 20 of the Warsoul tablet, and one of them had even ascended the throne of the first. A lineup that possessed such strength was really slightly terrifying. Could it be that the karmic luck of the Darchu dynasty has started to turn around? How could so many extraordinary figures appear within it? Everyone looked at this scene with shock, and they pondered swiftly in their minds. The first, After he smiled and greeted Huangfu Qingying and the others, Xianxia looked at the position of the first on the Warsoul tablet as a trace of excitement couldn't help but surface in his heart, and then he recovered his absolute calm. He absolutely didn't think that he could look down upon everyone within Primeval City after he ascended to the first ranking. He knew extremely clearly that this was merely the display of his own strength and potential, and it couldn't prove anything. Moreover, it was completely different from true battle.